e corações. Nandito hamdu todos kislaku. Kahit kau pun itu jangan pun. Hoguha kirida iquinai zaku. Hoguha nina injus. Hoguha bonita senguinai zaku. Hoguha todo e tempo. Hamdu todos kislaku. Kahit kau pun itu jangan pun. Membunyitu hamdu todos kislaku. Kahit kau pun itu jangan pun. Membunyitu hamdu todos kislaku. Kahit kau pun itu jangan pun. Afahau pun sogwi jangan liiju. Kau pun hana gini magigifion hu. Afahau pun sogwi jangan diiha. Na itu kirida e corações. Membunyitu hamdu todos kislaku. Kahit kau pun itu jangan pun.
Hafade, good morning, everybody. Hoping everyone can hear me.
Hafade.
Hafade. We're live on Facebook and live with our attendees. Tiha, I'll hand it over to you.
Viva, buenas and hafade. Welcome back for some of you, or for the very first time, to the second annual fall webinar for CHamoru Pathways through Higher Education. I'm very excited to introduce my co-chair, my co-conspirators, organizers, etc., and to lead you through, who will lead you through a process to demystify, decolonize, and to discover higher education. I want to be very clear that this is an all CHamoru effort, volunteer effort, and I am so grateful to all of those who are participating and all of those who will join us, whether in the recording or live on Facebook. Let me just say a little bit about my background, and then I'm going to move through as quickly as I can. Gwahusi Professor Antoinette Setfers McDaniel, Familian Kapili, Deru, Zedze, Tsungi, Zan Carabao, Tau Tau Tamuning, Zan Baragada. My pronouns are Gui, Guidza, and ya, Zanya. In English, they would be she, her, and hers. I am currently coming to you from the lands, the indigenous lands of the Erie and Kaskaskia peoples. It is a profound honor to welcome you to this event. And I'll have just a few comments before I turn it over to our technical producer who will give us some housekeeping tips. And then we'll move into 4 really, truly fabulous panels. I'd like to start by mentioning that this event is in association with the fairly newly created Masakata Collective, which is a Familauan and non-binary centered group of CHamoru Siha, primarily but not exclusively based in Turtle Island. We also are welcomed back and supported by our original sponsor, the CHamoru Association of the Midwest, where the original idea for this event came into being. And just very briefly, my first objective was just to talk to CHamoru parents and students in somebody's living room. But because of the pandemic, it's now become a webinar event. I'd like to introduce, first of all, my returning co-chair, the brilliant and amazingly talented Christine Camacho. And if you can just wave as I call your name back. Buenas, Signot Clarence Mendiola, who is her partner, but is also returning as our technical producer. He created our website and has helped with marketing materials and has just been indispensable in both the first fall webinar and this one as well. Joining us this year are several volunteers from Masakata. Mia Babauta, are you in? And many of the volunteers are also going to be presenting on panels. Mia Babauta Murray, Emily McMath, if you can wave, also returning this year. She was originally a panelist in what is now called the Taigueno Unsogwi, or This Is How You Do It panel, that tackles specific issues related to creating preparing a college admissions packet. We have Emily Wood, if you can wave, Emily, who helped out with connecting us. We are building a database of CHamoru organizations, of CHamoru scholars, and Emily does work for Halipara Gupa. So thank you, Emily, and also Savina and some of the other folks over there for supporting this effort. Both Emily and Mia will be on the new all undergraduate panel. They also created our IG accounts, meaning Instagram. For those nanny boomers who may not know what Instagram is, I am still a novice, but I know that's where the Manhoban are. They handled bios and headshots. I'd also like to introduce, as part of the organizing committee, Tomika Lavardi who will also, can you wave, please, who will also be part of the Taigueno and Sogwi. She is an amazing scholar in her own right and has a master's degree in chemistry from the University of Arizona. She created also a brand new feature, which I'm really excited about, and I imagine is going to, you might want to get your tissues ready. It's the Manyaina Zan Mangatsung tribute on the behalf of panelists and organizers who submitted pictures and gave thanks to those who supported them. Not pictured is Jaylene Solis, also a member of Masakata, who helped create flyers and assisted with marketing. So Dankaluna Sudzus Masi to all of them and our amazing volunteer panel, all volunteer CHamoru panel of chairs, scholars, graduate students, undergrads, and alumni. We will be having 4 panels today that are featuring, again, current CHamoru faculty, doctoral students, graduate students, undergraduates, as well as alumni. At this point, before I go make a very short presentation on my own to sort of break down what we mean by CHamoru's demystifying, decolonizing, and discovering higher education, as is appropriate for many of our CHamoru gatherings, I'd love to start with our Inafrasi, which will be led by my spring co-chair, C. Professor Megetu Tuncap. And if we can highlight Megetu, who is going to be sharing, leading us in the Inafrasi by Senora Bernadette Dumka, originally created by her. So Saina Masi to Senora, and for now, your sobrino, si Professor Megetu, is going to lead us in the Inafrasi.
Hafide Manelu Totomablik, Guahu Manengenza, Manjamek na furnace. It's cold in my house right now. I'm very cold. La Anhu Miget Tunkap, Lahin si David Gumatata Tunkap. Ginim Familia and Chobik, Zani Lahin, Violetta Teresa Nicholas, Ginim Familia and Tonku. And it's an honor to be here with you today. I just sent Clarence a link for the video, which has the images of Inanamu Tanu, the images of Guahan. And Clarence, if you can get ready to cue that up, this will give us a space for us to sing the Inafresi together. Originally, I was supposed to co-chair a panel, and in the last minute, I was asked to help with the Inafresi. I want to pause for just a moment before we sing that together to acknowledge Jacob Blake, to acknowledge Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, to acknowledge all the Black lives that matter in the wake of this historic verdict, and to stand against white supremacy as CHamoru people, because we know that our colonization we face is linked to the colonization of other people of color. And so I send my love to the Blake family and to all the families who have faced this kind of violence. Clarence, por favor. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well so that people can see the. Whoever is controlling the, oh, there we go. Thank you, Clarence. For those of you who have never been home is in your body. It's in your blood, it's in the water in your body. So welcome home, familia. Nunga maadna mola CHamoru.
Fresh in my side too. Fenogi CHamoru. Hinasoku Imastakaloki Kurasoru Zanimas Figo Nani Natsenyahu Who in my satu Fenogi CHamoru Barabai Protehi Zanhu defendi Ihinengi Ikotura Ilengwahi Airi Ihano Tanitano CHamoru kini nasu ustata esti huafin magihilo ipiplia Jani banderahu ipenderengwahan
Jani Saipan, Jani Tinian, Jani Luta, Jani Mandalu, CHamoru.
Dan. Biba, Biba, Sainamasi Migetu for leading us in that spiritual chant and a reminder of who we are, descended from ancient seafaring peoples who left the southeastern part of Asia and took to the open seas. One of the things we'll talk about is decolonization. It's really important to recognize that we continue, at least in Guahan, to be a colonial possession. That's 500 years. But we go back, our people go back thousands, millennia. So thank you for that. And I would like to echo your remarks and your condolences. This is a period of mourning for many. And one of the reasons that this webinar actually exists is because it's important for us to mourn with each other, to inspire each other, to reassure each other, and to do so also with our allies, with whom we share similar experiences and yet distinct experiences. So Sizus Masi Migetu for bringing that to the fore. All right, so I'd like to just share my screen, if I may. I just have a couple of short remarks, and then we'll turn it over to Clarence for housekeeping, and then we'll get the show on the road, as they say. So if I can share my screen. All right, and let me move this down. That's my dad, who you'll hear a little bit more about in just one moment. And there's mom at their complemento when they're on the island. And for those who are not familiar, I was not familiar with this until I was much older, that the complemento was the tradition where the groom's family would welcome and greet the new woman into their lives. So there are a number of different innovations we've done this year, but I thought it was something that was addressed and has been brought up by a number of my co-conspirators on the organizing committee. Oh, and I'm sorry, Teilani Camacho was also on the organizing committee. She's also chairing, so shout out to Teilani. But I've had conversations with C. Christine and C. Tailani, who really wanted to address the way in which our parents or their parents supported them at distinct moments in their lives. And for me, there's a very common quote that's used in the traditional universities about standing on the so-called shoulders of giants. It's, I believe it was someone's reference to Isaac Newton. For me, the shoulders of the giants on whom I stood were my parents. And I'd also like to suggest that this goes back to our ancestors again, to really recenter that we are ancient indigenous peoples and that we are survivors. So another thing that comes to mind is I'm not a chapter and verse kind of person, but it does, I've been thinking about meditating about that saying that the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And here I'm referring to each of these panelists. I'm referring to each of you who have already been endeavoring to pursue and to carve out a distinct pathway through higher education. So this was originally going to be part of my Mañana tribute. And as usual, I wrote too much. And when I was composing it, I got very emotional. But this is a tribute to my parents who were born 6 months apart in 1938 and lived through the Japanese occupation as small children. You grew up in schools where CHamoru was stigmatized and children were fined a nickel or even beaten for speaking Ifi no Hadza. At the age of 19, you, my father, enlisted in the US Navy, left Guam for the first time in your young life, and eventually brought a young family together to Turtle Island, since few alternatives to make a living existed in our homeland. With meager resources except for your deep faith in God and one another, intense self-discipline. You both managed to raise 5 children, all of whom attended 4-year universities at a time when even fewer of our people were encouraged or even thought to do so, particularly if they also came from modest backgrounds like our own. Many of us, I want to mention, are first generation. Whether you are first generation as a faculty member, I believe Serena, my colleague Serena, Megetu are both fit into this category. We are standing on the shoulders of these giants. But I did want to say a little bit about what part of our motto, if you will, of the webinar that they're running again. What does it mean to and why do, not just what does it mean, but why do we need to quote unquote demystify, decolonize, and help other Chamorros discover higher education? There's a way in which it's kind of ironic because demystify itself sounds kind of scary, like a scary big word. And I just want to break it down. To demystify is to make something to pull the curtain back, so to speak. For those of you who are in the midst of possibly either thinking about or you're nervous about applying to college for the first time, irrespective of your age, because I'm also really proud that we have adult learners here who are going back to pursue their first degrees and complete their first degrees. It can be very mystifying. It can be very intimidating to get these brochures or even to hear people talk about pursuing their higher education, particularly if your parents did not do so. And even with encouragement from our mañana, as I had a lot of encouragement, it didn't mean that they could help me. And so this is why I've tried to convene and curate panels of Chamorros who can show you that this is possible. This is not a Hallmark event where we're going to say everything, there was music playing and everything was great, or, you know, to sort of riff on the upcoming series of not Chamorro, but Christmas movies that are the guilty pleasure of many of us. Although last year, I won't even go into the one Guam focus, supposedly rom-com on Netflix. But the point is that we are all here to share our journeys and to encourage each other, to reassure each other, and hopefully to inspire some of you who might be on, you know, sort of sitting on your hands and saying, I'm not capable of doing this. One of the things two things my mother taught me is not to be vanidoso. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Vanidoso, when I grew up, was a bad word, as I heard it. And it was really sort of this reminder of a core value that we're raised with, to be mamalo, to be humble, which I think is really important. But there's another way in which I simply cannot repress the profound sense of vanidoso of all of the people in this group. So I'm here to argue that in ways that are culturally consonant with our Chamorro upbringing as Pacifica peoples, that we are allowed to be proud of where we came from and who we are. So this is not about bragging that we are fancy, hamzu, right? So we're fancy people, no, this is about saying, look, we as a people have the strength, the resources, the intellect to pursue these degrees and to bring into the institutions our distinctive values, which leads me to the term decolonize. Technically speaking, to decolonize means to change the political status so that Indigenous peoples can self-determine their political status in the world. It's considered by the United Nations to be a basic fundamental human right. And yet Chamorros on Guahan have yet to be afforded that right. CNMI, our brothers and sisters on CNMI, did make some decisions through plebiscite, but Guahan continues to be, as established by the United Nations, one of the final 17 global colonies. Beyond that, beyond that, I think much more importantly, what this webinar is about is decolonizing our mind. It's the ability to center our distinct values of inafamalik, meaning to be interdependent, to look out for each other inagofli'i, to really truly see one another and to care for one another and to love one another. And I would argue for diasporic Chamorros, the Inafa Malik is, you might not have even known that that's how you were raised, but inagofli'i for people in the diaspora. And I don't think we have to apologize for that, because that our diaspora is the product of larger political, historical processes. But inagofli'i, I want you to see these scholars. I want you to know who, again, I'm going to slip and call her a badass, even though I always feel very uncomfortable and like I'm very much a square nanny boomer. But, you know, Serena Saturn is a badass. She's an associate professor at University of Portland. We have someone who is who majored in nuclear engineering. In other words, he is a Chamorro rocket scientist, right? So by decolonizing and understanding these distinct pathways, we can affirm that we are Banidoso, not of our individual selves, but of our collective history as Chamorro people. Respetu, Tsentsuli, all of these values. To decolonize in this space means to center our values as Chamorro people in higher ed. Finally, I think without further ado, Mailet Tahalam. And I'm going to turn it over to Clarence and stop sharing. And then Clarence, if you can just go ahead and do the housekeeping tips for us, we'll get the party started with our very first panel. Biba, let's get the energy up, right? We're going to be here together. Let's give some love to everyone. So Clarence, por favor. Clarence?
Thank you. So just a few quick housekeeping rules before we get started. You'll only be able to see the panelists. The panelists will not be able to hear or see you. You can engage with the panelists in the chat. We also have a few Chamorro themed giveaways, and we'll announce the winners at the end. Be sure to like and share our Facebook feed through the Chamorro Pathways Through Higher Education Facebook group, which I will put a link in the chat. And then the panelists, just a quick reminder, please mute yourself if you're not presenting, and remember to unmute when it's your turn to present. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Professor Serena Saturn.
Be here and just thrilled to be among such beautiful company with all of these extraordinary badasses. And thank you so much, Tia, for bringing us together. You're the ultimate badass for this beautiful panel. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and introduce my panelists. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. I just want to start by acknowledging the land that I'm occupying now in the Portland metro area and the village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Clackamas, Clackamas, bands of Chinook and Tualatin and Kalapuya, right here at the University of Portland. And just to kind of follow up, and I just love this opportunity just to thank the indigenous Chamorro people, our ancestors who go back millennia, and we're standing on their shoulders today. I will talk a little bit more about my journey, but something that I've been really devoted to, which is kind of understanding the colonization of our people. And, you know, Guam was claimed by Spain in the 16th century, and a lot of those colonial perspectives still permeate higher ed today. Also I'm in a PhD in neuroscience, but right now I'm in psychology, gender, women, and sexuality studies, and also ethnic studies. And as a feminist, just processing how we had a matrilineal and matrifocal dimensions in our lineage, and how in a lot of things, the symbolic societal power that used to reside primarily in women has been kind of taken away. But I'm here to reclaim and decolonize. This amazing panel will be really to give you this visual and auditory proof, if you will, that not only Chamorros are capable of doing high-level scholarly work, but also doing so across all these different disciplines. So I'm so excited to go through all of these wonderful panelists and showcase them today. And really just our relative sense of being invisible in higher education. I also wasn't connected to a lot of Chamorros through my journey until I got to the professor level. But what a better way to see and to showcase and to pull away the curtain, so to speak. This is my family. My mama comes from the Artero Sablan clan. My grandfather was from Saipan. My grandmother was from Guam in Aganya. And this is a big part of myself today, but being a part of the diaspora is very complicated. You know, something I didn't really resonate with and really reflect on is how, you know, community college was a huge part of my trajectory in preparing me for college so that I could get really good scores on the SAT, kind of like play the game, so to speak, to get into scholarships and things like that. And then also at the bookend to prepare for graduate school, if there were certain things that I didn't quite have to prepare. I ended up at the University of Oregon after spending my first year in the Midwest for college with a psychology and chemistry background. As mentioned, I have my PhD in neuroscience from New York University. And I'm not doing this here to wave my creds, but just to kind of say that I've, you know, been around and I've done postdoc work at Columbia Medical, Stanford, and UC Berkeley. I was an assistant professor at the Oregon State University for a while. Now I'm at the University of Portland, and I am up to some other things that maybe I can talk about next year. I'm also lucky enough to be a part of our Chamorro Club.
Out if
We
they
have a lot of Chamorro students at UP because it's a Catholic base. That's something I've also been grappling with is kind of, colonization of the Catholic Church of our people and all of these different pathways that have a very kind of
to be able to walk around.
I've also done some really cool things about the decolonization and colonization of the
Show some pictures of
Marianas with Miguel Bivacqua.
Yeah. She said she has
and also things related to women's reproductive rights in the Marianas. I'm really excited about some of our panelists because I've also been very, very embedded in suicide prevention awareness, especially with intersectionality, and to really honor the unique struggles of the QT BIPOC community. So a lot of our displays are full of colors and teal and pink and black and brown. Just to kind of understand the intersectional oppression and multiple marginality that affects us all. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have some wonderful, wonderful folks that will share a bit about their journey, and then we'll have some time for Q&A when we're finished. So I'm going to start with CHamoru Lujan, who is currently a graduate student at Seattle University and has a really cool background in business analytics. So go ahead and CHamoru and take it away.
Alrighty, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, sorry. Can you all see my screen? Okay, awesome. So thank you for the introduction. So my name is CHamoru Lujan. My clan name is Pali, and I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, the Stillaguamish, and the Duwamish, which is north of Seattle. I also, just a little bit about myself. Yes, I'm currently getting my Master of Science in Business Analytics at Seattle University. And I also currently work as a senior analyst in people strategy at Avanade, which is a Seattle area tech firm. And so I also put on here Tata Tacoma because I was born and raised in Washington State, and I spent the majority of my childhood in Tacoma. Very fortunate to be raised with it. Oh, I see Professor Migetu. Yeah, Tata Tacoma. Awesome. Yeah, and a lot of my family is still there. But yeah, I was primarily raised there within my mother's family. And so that actually kicks off my story of my own path to higher education. So the path to higher education started before me. A lot of my family actually left the island, some went back, but a lot left to pursue higher education throughout multiple generations in my family. It wasn't always consistent, you know, depending on circumstance, but essentially from the time I was 5 years old, my mother, my grandmother told me, you will go to college. And they told me that school was my job. That was my responsibility in the family, to study hard and do well. So so I treated it as my job. I studied really hard and poured myself into that, because I also I have a lot of amazing women in my family who've achieved quite a lot. And I wanted to be just like them. I wanted to be just like my mom, just like my aunties who'd gone through school. I even grew up seeing like one of my aunties go through pharmacy school, and you know, just like I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to be just like them. So I studied really hard. And by the time it came to applying for college, to be honest with you, I didn't know where I wanted to go. I just wanted to go to college and get a degree because that's what I was told I needed to do. I was fortunate to have a really strong support system from my school and my college counselor, who, you know, kind of steered me to look at certain schools that I wouldn't have considered. And so I applied to, got accepted, and eventually attended Seattle University for my bachelor's degree because I was fortunate to get a really generous academic scholarship from them. So yeah, focusing on my studies and also extracurricular activities, you know, it really helped to not only get me into a school that I thought would be completely out of reach for me, but also just to just make it more feasible. And then I double majored in accounting and business economics. Now, a quick note about this. Sometimes when you are making these big decisions or milestones, for me at least, I felt a lot of pressure because it wasn't just about me. My family had worked really hard to get me to that point. And I wanted to try to do something that I thought would be practical, that would give a good like return on their investment. And so I majored in those because I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a lawyer. And so then my family encouraged me like, well, we should do business then. So I did. But then when I finished my degrees, I was kind of left with, oh my gosh, I don't actually know what I want to do, because I wasn't sure. I had studied really hard and my whole world was school. And then I made the decision, you know, before I consider any more education, I'm going to work, get to know myself better, and then try to make a decision. Because my family was pushing me. They're like, you need to get your master's right now. And I was like, oh no, I want to work, try it out. So I had a very career path after I got my bachelor's, because I made a promise to myself when I graduated. I said, I'm going to take on as many opportunities as is feasible to try to figure out what it is I'd like to do for a career. So I did everything from, one of my first jobs was I made a cost model for a natural bedding company in the Seattle area. I also worked as a pension analyst doing tax compliance and retirement plans. I worked in the nonprofit world doing data and database administration. I even was pursuing a Master of Divinity for 2 years. Now, all of that is probably kind of confusing. Like, how do you get from that to analytics? Well, that was me trying to find myself and figure out what it was I liked and didn't like for a career. And through that, I eventually realized, like, yeah, you know, analytics is something that I am really interested in, because I worked with data all throughout. Like in every single job I did, I was working with data. And so I made the decision, I switched out of my Master of Divinity into my current program, which I'll be finishing up in June. So yeah, it was sort of a really long path. And so then next, so just a quick overview, like what exactly is business analytics? So essentially what you do is you take data and you turn it into insights and information so that businesses can make better data-driven decisions. Now, data, some people might be familiar with spreadsheets just full of numbers. That is one form that data takes. And in analytics, you might be working with multiple tables with hundreds of thousands, even millions of rows. And it's a really interesting space because you work to not only figure out what the data is telling you, what kind of story it's telling you, but also to identify interesting, crucial relationships between those data sets. And so on the front end, so this is an example of sort of the tip of the iceberg of like the finished product of something you might do. And now with anything, when you look at the finished product, right, it's sort of the tip of the iceberg and you're not seeing all of the work that goes into it. So this was something I did as an assignment for my program, which involved querying multiple databases. So you're trying to find where the data lives, and then you want to bring it together in an intelligent way. And then you explore it. I'm trying to figure out like, what is it even saying? Because, you know, a human looking at a million rows of numbers, that's not going to tell you anything. And so it's a lot of exploring the data using, you know, anything from basic descriptive statistics to maybe even more sophisticated methods such as machine learning or statistical analysis to figure out what is the story that's being told. And so from a business perspective, this might be something that I might make for a client or a stakeholder to help them just see what's going on in all of those numbers. Because it's not, you can't read it. And so the visualization part is often, you know, the front end of it, of business analytics. And then, so this is like sort of the front end of what I do. One thing I wanted to talk about, though, was asked to talk about, is the intersection of business analytics or just analytics in general with CHamoru, because sometimes I felt like it wasn't possible to pursue a career that also fed into or uplifted my CHamoru identity or even the interests of the CHamoru people. And with analytics, I found that you absolutely can, because first of all, data is everywhere. We all interact with data or even generate data every single day, from, you know, our checking accounts to maybe you have a meditation app that tracks how often you meditate. If you do bullet journaling and you do a mood tracker, that's data right there. Well, language is also a form of data. And so through analytics, I was just curious when I started learning CHamoru last year. And so I was like, well, why don't I just apply analytics to just kind of get a different look at the CHamoru language. So one of the things I did, maybe it might sound kind of nerdy, I wanted to make a custom Scrabble tile set for myself, but I wanted to know what proportion of letters I should include in that set. So I gathered a bunch of articles in CHamoru, and then I wrote a program in Python to basically analyze the frequency of how often the different letters in the alphabet occurred, so I could get a better sense of how to build a Scrabble set for myself. And so this was something that again, this is the front end. I made this in Tableau, which is a data visualization software. And it's, again, the tip of the iceberg of the back end stuff. But it was sort of the start of, okay, like I can do this with analytics, and this sort of lays the foundation for other things that I can do, or if there's any other analytics professionals or computer scientists, like, you know, definitely would love to see your work too at the intersection of what you do and in CHamoru. But this was like the first thing that I did. And, you know, I was like, oh, okay, like this is interesting. And then the next thing that I did was, again, I applied the coding knowledge that I've been gaining through my master's, and I made a CHamoru English Kindle dictionary. And so here on the left is just a snippet of just like kind of what the back end looks like of some of the work that you might do. And so what I did is there was a free online dictionary, and so I made a tool to grab that dictionary and then transformed it, and I put it in a format so that if I was reading a document in CHamoru on my Kindle, I could tap a word, assuming it's in the dictionary, there's still more words to add, and be able to see the definition. So these are just a couple of cool like applications of analytics. And so I just wanted to talk about that. And so to kind of conclude my own like pathway, I did want to just share like the top 3 lessons that I learned. So the first lesson that I learned, truly, there are multiple paths to the same goal. when I was applying for college and even on my journey to business analytics, at first, I was really swept away with this narrative of this is the path that you must take. And that's just not true. There are so many different paths to achieve the same goal. And just because you're not fitting into the path that might be pushed to you, it doesn't mean that you can't reach that goal. So I just really want to emphasize that. And, when I look back now and I'm realizing so many different options that were available to me that I just didn't know about. So just please know that. And then, my own journey to my MS, is also evidence of that, because I didn't go straight through school. I had a winding path to get there. The second lesson I learned is it really is okay if you don't know right off the bat what you want to do. And if you don't know, it really is okay. Follow your interests because it will give you experiences that are uniquely yours. And also it will take you down paths that you never thought that you would go. So really, it's okay to not know. It's okay because you can learn through the journey. And that's definitely something that I've learned. Again, my very career path isn't evidence of that. And then the final lesson I learned is when you're thinking about higher education, it's okay to make room for yourself. So I had talked about how I felt the weight of family expectation. And when I was going to college, and what that manifested in is when I was in college, I devoted almost every spare moment to my studies in accounting and economics. I was really obsessed with every moment has to count toward this goal, this career. What I didn't realize is I definitely had the room to incorporate some of the things that I really loved. So theology, the arts, I just thought that there's no room for that. So there's definitely room to if you want to go a more practical route, right? Like what I did, you don't have to do that 100% of the time. And in fact, you'll find some unique intersections between the two. Also, if you want to follow your dreams, this is what I tell like my cousins, you can also make room to be practical. It's okay. You can major in music and, take some business classes. That is totally feasible. I wish that was something that I had known was possible for myself. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Biba Schuyler, that was brilliant. Absolutely. Let's give her a hand. That was brilliant. We're just getting started, people. We're just getting started. Thank you so much wisdom there. I'm sorry, Serena, I popped in where you should be, so apologies. So Professor Saturn is going to introduce our next panelist, and Tia's going to back off. I just let my energy get away from me. Sorry.
Oh, no, Tia, thank you so much for jumping in. I'm so glad you did. No apologies. I'm just so endlessly inspired and just truly honored to be able to introduce these extraordinary people. And thank you, Schuyler. That was so inspiring and so touching. And I'm just so great to see the diversity of different angles that people have to provide here. So Set Quinada is up next, and also a very inspiring and accomplished soul with a master's in social work from USC and a doctorate work in integrative social work at Saybrook. And I just want to, something that's also coming up for me is just modeling, right? When you need to take a break, when you need to redirect course, when you need to find the places that are affirming and welcoming, go there. And so, yes, Biba Set, I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
Hafide, Tora Samzu, Inahanu, si Josette Marie Lujan Kinata, si Nanahu, si Vivian Lujan, Familian Sadat from Sinahanya Guahan. My maternal grandmother, who I call Nana, is Veronica Castro Lujan, and my paternal grandma is Rosita Chargala, originally from Molesut, and married my grandfather, Vicente Kinata, from Humatak. I was born in Guam, and in my elementary years, I also moved to California The reason being was because my parents had divorced, and during that time, my Nana also needed dialysis. And so my family felt it was best that she get it off island. And so we traveled over to California, moved there. I am the oldest of 7. I am also raised by my mom, my Nana, and my maternal aunt and uncle, whom I call mom and dad as well. So I was very fortunate to have a lot of family support. I am also the first in my family to attend college. And so being the first one to attend a 4-year university, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have an 8th grade teacher who I actually TA'd for, kind of take me under her wing in middle school in my transition, getting ready to go into high school. And actually encouraged me to join a program called AVID. And it's actually stands for AVID, it stands for Advanced Via Individual Determination. And it's really geared towards a program that is made, that is meant actually for first generation college students to help support not only the student, but also the family, understand concepts such as, SATs and FAFSA and scholarships, and all the fun stuff leading up to admissions into a college program. And so I was blessed enough to be able to attend an AVID class all 4 years throughout my high school. And so by the time I was a senior in high school, I was actually able to decide that I wanted to live on campus based on my field trips that I attended throughout different universities, and also guest speakers coming into the classroom and being able to share their own direct experience. I knew that I wanted to actually live on campus. I applied to various different schools in California, out of state, and as far as Hawaii, and I got into 7. And what really narrowed my decision was I actually attended Chapman University's. It was like their incoming freshman kind of like recruitment, and just kind of an open house. And so I was able to attend that in Southern California. I attended on a day where it was like gloomy and rainy, but something inside when I went on campus, I really felt just this connection, like this is where I belong. And so that really solidified my decision. And Chapman is a small private university. I was the only Chamorro there. I was actually known as the Guam girl. I wore a lot of, Chamorro or Guam shirts and talked a lot about Guam in my classes or in my papers. And so that's what I was known as. And I really actually learned more about myself in Chapman because I originally came in as a declared communications major and decided to, kind of what Skylar had said, and made room for myself to kind of change. Ended up taking a sociology course and fell in love with it, and ended up switching to sociology as my major. And during one of the courses, I took an Indigenous rights class and realized that I am actually Indigenous and come from an Indigenous culture. And so in my learning of my own identity, I was actually fortunate enough to actually participate in a program called Washington Semester Program. And it actually allows students from various universities to actually work in the federal government directly in DC. And while this was an amazing opportunity, I only wanted to ensure that I actually got a chance to work where it really mattered for our people. And that was at the Department of Interior, Office of Insular Affairs. And so I was able to actually gain work experience there. I was there for almost a year and participated during the time where the Guam war claims hearing happened in 2004, and just really saw what happened within the discussions between congressional delegates, island governors, island presidents. And so it was really a momentous time for me. What was really moving for me actually also was during my process and learning more about myself in this journey, I actually met other Chamorros in California, and together with Maguette Bivacqua, Alfred Flores, and Destiny Tatauta, we actually co-founded a grassroots organization called Famuksaisen. And in meeting them, we were able to have a conference, and various people, came from all over California, states, and also inclusive of Guam. And it was a real experience to me in terms of being able to really not only solidify what I was doing in school and what I had learned, but also to be able to take that and learn more about myself and to actually advocate more for Indigenous rights in our people. And so with that, I ended up graduating, and through my activism and my community work, I knew I wanted to help people. And so I took some years off and just kind of did more of trying to figure out really where my interest was, and realized that social work is actually something that also called me and connected to me. And I ended up taking my master's at the University of Social Work. And I'm an advocate. I'm a community social worker. I've been in medical practice, and recently was back home as a medical social worker, helping from cancer patients to home care and hospice, and just really really wanting to really help the lives of our, Ramanunko especially. So that's a little bit about me and my journey through higher ed.
Viva Set, let's go ahead and give her some Vivas and give lots of love. Set is such an amazing jewel and leader. Again, Serena, I'm so sorry. I'll try to stop talking. I'm just excited.
Oh, I'm so excited too. Jump in anytime. I'm just so awed. And so thank you, Seth. That was also just so beautiful. And it's just so wonderful to see such amazing souls just devoted to the welfare of others. It's just kind of almost like our cultural calling, right, to serve. And so and I love all those paths. All right, I also, it's so hard to not, this panel is also very humble. And so it's really hard to really brag about them and tell their story before introducing them, but I'll let them tell their own story. So I'm just really honored to be here. And yes, yeah, jump in anytime. Up next, we have Emily Wood, who also has a beautiful past and is currently a grad student in international development at Georgetown University. Welcome, Emily.
Today, Todo Samsu. I'm sorry, there might be some background noise. Hopefully you can hear me fine though. Wahusi Emily Wood, Familian Katsung Ingles Santungo, Tautalinahan Santamuning. But right now I am currently on Anacostia lands, which is Washington, DC, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So yeah, my story, it feels like a long one, even though I'm still pretty young. I was a first, and I still currently am, a first generation college student. So throughout high school and the whole college admissions process, my family couldn't really help me along the way because they didn't have really any idea of what it means to go to college or how to apply for colleges or even about like financial aid and scholarships. So I had to really figure that all out on my own and decide that I wanted to go to college on my own. And I went to high school in Wyoming. So it was also a very white community. There wasn't much diversity. There weren't other Chamorros or Pacific Islanders around for the most part. So a lot of what I learned along the process was just Googling things, Googling scholarships, because I knew I couldn't pay for college. I knew my parents couldn't contribute much. And along that way, I found different opportunities to visit schools, visit like small liberal arts universities without having my parents to bring me to those places. So if that's something that that you need help with, there are different programs where the colleges will pay for you to go visit and check it out, and you're not obligated to go to that school because obviously they just want to try and recruit diverse people, and they'll provide the flights and the transportation and the housing for a weekend for you to go visit. So I participated in a few of those, and that was super helpful because otherwise I wouldn't have had the chance to really go visit any other schools and get a feel for it. And but when it came down to it, the schools that I that were my top choices, they didn't offer enough financial aid, despite all the different like scholarship programs I had applied for. It was still extremely expensive, and I didn't want to go into debt or make my parents go into debt for my education. So what I actually ended up doing is I took a gap year, which is getting to be a little more common, but at the time, not really many people did that. And I had found a scholarship to study abroad as an exchange student in Germany through the US Department of State. And it was a great opportunity and I loved it. I learned so much. I learned German. I got to live with the host family and really experience the culture. And I didn't have to pay for it. So there are also different scholarships for that as well, for high school students and high school graduates to study abroad and experience a culture beyond your immediate surroundings. A lot of those are offered through the Department of State and they can pay for it fully. So that's what I did. And then I reapplied for colleges during that year, hoping that I could get a little bit more money. And I wasn't very successful, at least in my top choices, which were smaller private colleges. So I ended up choosing to go to the University of Wyoming, which was about 30 minutes from my house. And I was very, very distraught at this choice because I didn't want to go to Wyoming, even though they offered me a full scholarship. So that was like the logical choice, but I had already done a summer camp there. I knew what it was like. I lived there. But I ended up going and having a great time. So even if you don't get into your top choice or aren't able to afford it, or for some reason, college is really what you make of it. It isn't, you can have the same experiences at any college or any university. There are different opportunities for growth, different scholarships, different activities, different groups of people. So even if it's not your top choice, you can make that experience even better than what you were expecting, because you can't predict everything right off the bat either. You can't expect what it's going to be like, even from just one visit over a weekend. That doesn't give you the full culture and the full story. So that's a really important lesson that I learned throughout that process. And I enjoyed my time at the University of Wyoming. It was fantastic. And I was able to find a lot of different resources as well there. I ended up studying abroad multiple times because I found scholarships to do so. So if anybody has scholarship questions, for sure, feel free to ask me. I have all these different resources. I was able to go to Indonesia for a summer to learn Indonesian with a critical language scholarship. And I studied abroad for a year in Lithuania. And I didn't have to pay for any of these, which otherwise I wouldn't have been able to go on have any of these experiences. So there are lots of different opportunities available, even if you can't afford it on your own. And yeah, it's important to take advantage of the different opportunities and just expand your horizons, try new things. I had no background in Indonesian, or I knew nothing about Indonesia before I went there. And it has actually helped me on my journey for learning Chamorro, because they are of the same language family and there are a lot of similarities. And that has really helped me along the way of reconnecting with my own heritage and my own background, which is something that I never expected to really get out of that experience. So yeah, and then since graduating, I joined the Peace Corps for a little bit, and that exposed me to the world of international development, which, breaking that down, it's really working with people in other communities to try to improve their lives. And this can happen in a lot of different ways. It can happen through education, through the economy, through infrastructure like building roads, or through healthcare. That's just to name a few, through agriculture. So it's still a very broad topic, but after learning more about our Chamorro background and that whole history, and leading up to the situation in Guam and the Marianas right now, I wanted to try and combine those two in a career with international development. So really focusing on Indigenous peoples and Indigenous rights, and building up communities through that. So I decided to come back to school, started grad school, and I'm currently at Georgetown University studying international development. And I found a scholarship for that as well. I found the fellowship through the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, and they are paying for my grad school, and after that I'll have a career with USAID. So I'm really excited for that. Seem to have things mostly figured out, but I also know that things will change along the way, and I really hope to just take advantage of all the different opportunities and try and incorporate all of these lessons and all of this background into my career, into my studies.
Thank you, Emily. It's so beautiful to hear about your path and all of your experiences. And I want to thank all the panelists for sharing their life experiences and their journeys as well. And I think we'll just open it up to any questions or Q&A in the chat as we close up this session. And I guess as we wait for it to come in, something that I've just been pondering is how it doesn't have to be a nice and neat path, and you don't have to know exactly what you're going to do, and just to seek opportunities, and there's no wrong decisions. Even if you land in a horrible program or a horrible boss situation, there's ways of making it your own. And what do you think, Tia? Should I wait for that question? Something that I was wondering if any of you wanted to speak on is how we've learned so much from things that haven't maybe gone according to the great plan, so to speak. And one thing that I study a lot about is the neuroscience of resilience and post-traumatic growth. And there's a lot of trauma in the academy, especially if you're a woman or non-binary, especially if you're a person of color, and just the isolation and this lack of like role models around and what you're supposed to be doing with your path. So do any of you, I guess I just wanted to mention, my first year, I got a full ride. I was very, very homesick. I felt very out of my element. And just to date myself, the internet came out and I had a lot of empathy. So I bombed, and I used to be a superstar in math and in science. And I lost my scholarship, and then I ended up at the University of Oregon in my home state after getting a full ride to move away to the Midwest. And I was mourning and grieving there, but it turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I reestablished new connections and friendships and ended up with a beautiful career, and I'm in a current situation. Yeah, Chelsea, it looks like you have a question or comment. Go for it.
Hongen, Sainamasi. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say so far that I am deeply appreciative to all the panelists that shared, especially coming out here from diaspora. I think it's so important that the Chamorros and Micronesians in diaspora continue to share their experiences, especially with people from the motherland. Just to show each other that we're sort of going through the same things, even though we're in different areas. So I just wanted to share that this is very much filling the inner child in me. So Sainamasi, Hugwaizaha, everybody.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing that so much. I do see a beautiful question in the chat just talking about how you've been able to navigate imposter syndrome. And I just wanted to quickly mention that I study the neurobiology of emotions, and I've been really interested in imposter syndrome and have felt like an imposter my entire life growing up and all through the academy. And one thing that has really been a reckoning for me in the past few years is like, that is really imposed on especially women of color, and it's society, and it's structural barriers, and it's embedded misogyny and racism, and colonization that makes us feel like we're imposters. So I think part of it's like, oh, there's some personal failing, I don't belong, I need more confidence, but it's really about kind of systems and structures that make us feel like we don't belong and that we're imposters when we do indeed belong. So I commend you all for persisting and resting when needed in the academy. Yeah. Would any of you like to talk about imposter syndrome during your professional journey?
I can just say one word or just a bit about that. I found it really important to connect with others. Maybe I won't be able to connect with other Pacific Islanders because like others had said, I've often been the only Pacific Islander in the space I've been in, particularly in my professional life, but I found it important to be in spaces with other professionals of color, other women, specifically women of color, because what can happen is when you're just surrounded by one narrative that says that you're not good enough, that can really get to you. And so it's really important to connect with other people to know sometimes just at a base level, I'm not crazy. And also I am worthy, I am awesome, I'm smart, I belong in this space. It's something I definitely continually struggle with, especially now, because sometimes not only might I be the only Pacific Islander in a space, I might be the only woman. And so it's really important to connect with other people outside of those spaces so that you can have that affirmed. I would definitely recommend, at least for me, don't try to go it alone in that way. And it's not weakness because you can't go it alone.
Thank you, Tyler. Yes, Emily.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit. I agree fully with Shyler, with what Shyler was saying. All of it is so important to find a community or build a community around you, because most other people feel the same way too. You're not the only one. And for me, just very personal to my situation, especially with my desire to work in international development and really work with other Indigenous communities. My background is very different. Even though I identify as Indigenous, I haven't had the same experiences as a lot of other communities who have been like more marginalized, because I've grown up in more white spaces and can pass as white. So I don't have that same background, but I think it's still important to recognize that everybody, no matter where you are, where you're coming from, does have different backgrounds, and that doesn't take away from your identity or how you belong to a certain group. So it's really important to recognize like the intersection of all your different identities and backgrounds and what you can contribute, even if you don't have that same exact experience as someone else.
Thank you so much, Emily. And Seth, do you want to say anything before we close out this panel? Any parting words of wisdom?
I think the one thing that I would just leave is, hope that people leave with is that, school is an educational course, but I think the one thing that we often forget is that it's really a learning journey about ourselves. And so I think as long as you know who you are and you can identify and hear, then everything else will just flow. Your support, your circle, and just where you go in the next steps. And so I think for me, it's just if I could leave, wisdom is just trust yourself and trust yourself through the process.
Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better. I just want to close by thanking our panelists so much. Thank you, Shyler
and Seth and Emily for sharing your journeys with us. We're going to go ahead and move to the next panel, but I just wanted to just express our immense gratitude and awe. And we're just, I guess, as a collective community of Chamorros, we're just so proud of you and seeing your way in the world and trusting yourself and knowing yourself.
Viva Sidus Masi, to all of the panelists and to our wonderful chair. Keep in mind that some folks will be leaving because, for example, I believe that Emily has some homework. She is a graduate student. So, and also I want to note that this is being recorded and streamed on FaceTime. So do not be discouraged if you see 32, where in fact we are engaging many more. And one of the other themes, we're running a little bit behind. So I just wanted to mention very quickly that I wanted to highlight the amount of agency and perseverance that the panelists have shared with you. And I think that's really interesting and important because by agency, again, I don't want to mystify. It's the idea that you can do on your own, that you can draw on your own reserves and brilliance. And I, for one, believe against the sort of individual achievement narrative that we're always relying on our parents and what they've given us. So it's not so much about your individual achievement, but the fact that you do have that resilience because our people are survivors and are brilliant contributors to global culture all over the world. So thank you to all of the panelists and to my colleague, Serena, my young colleague, by the way. So I was way before the internet. So anyhow, God bless you all and thank you. We're going to go ahead and move now to our second panel. This is a brand new panel. We recognize that there's a way in which some of the panelists can be a little intimidating. I'm intimidated, and I attended a fancy school, but I think it's really important for young people to hear from other young people, but also to highlight one of our speakers, a returning student, and to again highlight the fact that there are multiple pathways into higher ed. So with that, again, Emily McMath, I'm very proud of her because I met her online, and Micheline is going to talk a little bit about her research of digital organizing for Chamorros and the way we're connecting to one another. But Emily is a returning alum, if you will, and she is now chairing this brand new panel for us. So Emily, if you'll take it away and introduce your panelists, por favor.
Jesus Maasi Tiha, Hafade Torus, Guahusi, Emily McMath, Tautau Mong Mong, well, Familian Sindo, Tautau Mong Mong. I currently live in Rumson and Ohlone lands, or more commonly known today as Monterey, California. I am my heart is beating so fast, partly from nerves, but also partly just from the amazing gratitude I have to share space with such an incredible group of panelists and organizers. As Tiha mentioned, I was a part of this panel last year. I spoke on my experiences in writing my personal essay and also my senior capstone project that I completed at California State University, Monterey Bay. It was entitled, let me share my screen real quick. It was entitled, let's see, The Power of Guinaita, the Intersections of Love and Resistance Through the Native Chamorro Voice. And real quick, I'd like to go back and showcase, the reason why I am the person I am today. That is my family. So my Nana down here, Josefa Mendiola San Nicolas, she is an incredible woman and watching today. So Biba Nana. And up in the corner, I have my paternal grandparents from my father's side, Helga Kunish McGovern. She and my Nana were both born in the year 1938, one in East Germany and the other on Guam. So a very unique backstory to how I got here today, two resilient women, including, and also my mother on the right-hand side here. So going back to my capstone project on the intersections of love and resistance through the Native Chamorro voice, I focused on literary activism in our Chamorro community on Guam and in the diaspora. And I decided to submit that capstone to my university's Ethnic Studies Research Award. And I won, which was extremely validating. It was so wonderful to feel really seen and be published through my university and have an article about Chamorro literary activism be present on my campus. And I'm just so grateful that that opportunity was awarded to me, that I earned that opportunity, and it opened the door to myself speaking on the panel last year, which then opened the doors wide open. And I feel completely at home, even in a year like 2020, where there were many, many challenges for many, many people, including myself, with feelings of, that loss of connection, mahaling, as we say, the yearning for our people, our culture, our home. But I've never felt more at peace with who I am as a Chamorro student. I graduated, but I look forward to working toward my graduate degree and beyond, to continue to demystify, decolonize, and discover higher education. I am so very excited to hear from and learn from our amazing panelists. We'll be hearing from Mia Babauta-Murray. She's a third-year special education major from the University of Texas at Austin. We have then Chelsea Ray Cruz. She's a returning student at Miracosta Community College and the recipient of the SPIO scholarship. And then Mikaline Marie Menogogwi. We have her as a fourth-year Pacific Studies student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And the goal of this panel today, it is a new one that we created this year, is to engage current Chamorro high school students and adult learners to provide a range of experiences that differ in geography, age, and just really showcase the diversity in all of our pathways being different, yet we are all here today celebrating and honoring Chamorro resilience and excellence. And without further ado, I am so excited to invite Mia Babauta-Murray to speak on her experiences. Love you, girl.
Oh, I love you too. Okay. I'm starting. Okay. So Hafade, Guahu si Mia Babauta-Murray, Familian Min Janklandu Tautau Agate. So hello everybody. My name is Mia Babauta-Murray, and my family names are Min and Kalandu from Agate. And so let me share my screen real quick. I'm hoping everyone can see this. Hopefully, I think so. Yes. So yes, that is who I am. And I'm really nervous starting out, but I'm also very excited. So let's go forward. So thinking about my pathway to higher education, I think it didn't feel right to not start without my family and their pathway. So up here are my grandparents. So we have, to the right, we have Francisco Babauta and Annie Babauta. Francisco Babauta, he was born and raised in Agate, Guahan, and he attended Agate Elementary and George Washington High School, and he graduated from high school in 1962. Right out of high school, my grandfather, he decided to enlist in the military, in the Army. And the reasons he said that was because at that point in time, he felt that that was the best opportunity for him. He had never really thought of college as an option, and that was just not something he saw for himself, or something that was something he would pursue. And my grandma, Annie Babauta, she was born in from Santa Rita, Guahan, and she attended Agania Junior High, and she went to JFK High School, but she married my grandfather in 1963, so she did not complete high school, as when they enlisted, they moved around. And to the left, we have Wallace Murray and Marie Murray, and They both are my grandparents from my father's side, and my grandmother completed high school, and my grandfather did not complete high school. And so just looking towards my family and their pathway to higher education and their pathway through life, I just am always so proud of them. I'm so proud of all they did for me and my family. So after my grandparents moved around, on my mom's side. And so they moved around after the military, and they settled down in the States a little bit, and then they ended up in California. They had my mom, my Auntie Anne, and my Uncle Frankie in the process, and they ended up in Sacramento, California, where my mother met my father. They met in high school, and they got married when my mother and my father were about 18. They got married, and right after high school, my father enlisted in the military. And so from there, similar to my grandparents, they started moving around and looking towards their journey to higher education. My mother, everywhere that they went and they settled down, my mother always took college classes. She saw education as a way to get a job and a way to get a career. And so everywhere they went, my mother was taking classes, and that led to a lot of degree changes and a lot of changes in that, but she stuck with it. And so they just traveled all around, and here's some pictures of all of us together. And then for my father, once we finally settled down in San Antonio, he went out and he went to get his bachelor's in business. And he achieved that bachelor's. He was the first in his family to ever get a college degree, and same with my mother. She was the first in her family to ever get a college degree. And they went on to go get their master's. And looking back at it, all they did was so we could have a job, and they could support us. And they worked so hard for me. And so I wanted to mention that and show how proud I am of them. And I'm getting emotional. And so looking towards myself and my journey, I'm still figuring out who I am, how I fit into this. I am a third-year undergrad at UT Austin, and I'm studying special education. So I'm basically teaching students with disabilities, and I found a real passion for it in high school. I was involved in a program called Friends Having Fun, and we got to go into the special education classrooms and really form relationships with the students and the teachers, and I really fell in love with the classroom there. And I really saw myself doing that. And so going into college, I wanted to pursue special education. And upon getting to college, I think I found it very hard and very isolating. At UT Austin, our student population for Pacific Islanders, 0.1% of students are Pacific Islander at UT Austin. So it is very lonely. But going forward, and I think for my experience, these are the three things that keep me grounded, and I would recommend for you guys to think about going into college, and that's having a community. So these are some amazing people in my life who really push me to be better and really ground me. I think, like I said, it's very lonely in higher education sometimes, especially if you are at a school that has 0.1% Pacific Islander population, but knowing you have people to hold you whenever you're down and push you forward whenever you're up, that means the world, and that you're never really alone, even though it may feel like it. So I have some awesome people from Masakata Collective who truly, I love them so much. I love everybody up on this board so much. All of these people truly hold me, and they really care for me, and I am very blessed for that. And I think in times where it feels lonely, I remember that I have them, and I'm not going to cry. Also, in higher education and where we are, I think a big part is remembering who you are and staying grounded in that, even though you may feel alone, you're not. And so, like my family, and I'm choking up, okay. But when you do feel alone, sorry, I'm just so proud of them. You're not alone, because you have your family, and you stay grounded in knowing that no matter how isolated you may feel in these institutions, you have them. And also, maybe who you are is further than your family. Maybe, like we said, that community, always looking back to those people who really are there for you, and that keeps you there. Also, something I found is very important is to believe in yourself. Like I said before, these institutions, a lot of times they can feel very isolating, and you may feel alone. And a lot of times it's set up to make you feel like you are missing out on something, but you're not. Like we said before, and like you've seen, we have so many amazing, brilliant Chamorros, and we deserve to be in higher education, and we are powerful, and we are amazing. And so here's a picture of me. I wasn't sure. And believe me yourself, I was like, let's put a picture of me. But truly, a lot of times, like we said, pulling from that community and pulling from who you are your community. You are those people around you. And so the way you believe in them is the way you believe in yourself, because you are worthy of higher education. And like me, like I said, I'm still discovering where I fit into higher education, where I'm going with it. But I know that with this community, with the people that hold me, that I can do it. So in sum, you are powerful, you are brilliant, and you can do it. You are amazing and you are Chamorro. So that's my presentation. And thank you so much for listening to me. And I will stop my share.
Biba.
Biba, Sidus Maasi, Mia. I wish I could hug you through the screen and we could all just cry together, and we will here. And because that is a way that we are finding that deeper connection. Sidus Maasi for sharing all of that. I feel so inspired by you. I'm so lucky to have met you and to share space with you always. Okay, well, good thing I'm wearing waterproof mascara today, because I'm sure I will be crying a lot more throughout this webinar. So next up, I would like to invite Chelsea Ray Cruz to speak on her experiences. Chelsea, Sidus Maasi, take it away.
Thank you, Emily. I'm like breathing right now. Thanks, Mia, for setting me up. Before I presented, I was able to turn off my camera and now I'm not. Before I started, I just want to say thank you to Mia. Like, as you guys all know, just youth and young people is something that I'm very passionate at working with. And, Mia, just your words of saying that we are worthy of higher education and that, we have community, it's very important to me. And it's so cool that you're just this young person out here educating us. And me as like an older person, or like 30 years old, and you still in your early 20s, to be mentored and connected in that way is super awesome. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I'm gonna stop crying now. It is very powerful for me to hear and see everybody's vulnerability and truths in their experiences. It's something that I have self-muted within myself throughout my whole life. And it's just in our communities, or just anything in general, expressing our emotions was never something that was welcome for everybody. So this is really cool to cry. So yeah. Hafide Todos Hamzas, Guahu si Chelsea Cruz, Familian Tunda, and Telidu. My mother is Norma Jean Cruz Martinez, and her mother is Rosa Mendiola Cruz. And then my father is Andrew Guzman King, and his mother and father is Barbara and Ed Guzman as well. I am currently in Kumeyaay Territory, San Diego. I was born and raised in Guahan, in Oda, Guahan. And yeah, I didn't prepare a slide. I really enjoy storytelling and sharing my experiences. So I'm just gonna flow this way. I wanted to quickly share with you all that you guys are getting the truth of my educational experiences, which is something that I have yet to share until today in my 31 years of life. And I thought it was important to share that because it sort of explains my pathway to higher education. So yeah, I really love education. I love learning. I love teaching as well, but I also really love being a student over teaching. And I was doing very, very well in school on Guam up until my middle school experiences in 8th grade. I was going to school in the north because that's where my grandmother was working as a cook at Jigo Elementary School, which is now known as Daniel Lena's Perez Elementary School. And I've been like begging her for my whole life to go to Agata, which is in Ordot, in the village with everybody else and my friends and peers and family. And she finally allowed me to go to Agata. And once I got to Agata in 8th grade, everything sort of just started going downhill there from me. I started like getting into a lot of fights. And then I got into high school, which is in George Washington High School. And off the bat as a freshman, everybody told me, like, everybody was very like supportive of me and like being in high school and like being with my peers and my friends, knowing like, you know, my brain. So they wanted me to do very well. And they told me like, don't mess up freshman year, it'll mess up the rest of the year. And I totally did the opposite and messed up freshman year by getting into a lot of fights and skipping a lot of school, which eventually led me to going into juvenile detention on Guam, which is Department of Youth Affairs. I was going in and out of juvenile detention since 8th grade and freshman year, all the way up to 16 years old, where I was eventually kicked out of George Washington High School. Throughout that time, I was just like constantly getting into fights. And as I reflect back today, I feel like I was doing it just because. But well, I mean, you know, back then I was feeling like I was doing it just because, but now that I'm older and I reflect back, it really points out a lot of the losses and the traumas that I experienced throughout my life. One of them being the passing of my godmother, who was killed by a drunk driver. If you guys ever are in Guahan, she is in the Paseo area next to, I believe it's next to the 76 gas station, if I'm not mistaken. There's a mural there, but she was one of the main role models that really encouraged me to explore college and school. When the rest of the world had desktops and a stable internet connection, Wuhan was still behind. So we didn't really have all the access to the technology just yet. But she was one of the people who really wanted me to get a laptop and start exploring different places outside of Wuhan, and seeing what like education would look like through me, through my lens. So yeah, she passed away when I was 10 years old, which was in 5th grade. That was around 2000, the year 2000. And that's when, you know, everything again disconnected. My grandparents, I don't believe, finished high school. They are children of World War II. So they started getting into jobs right off the bat, especially my grandfather and my grandmother. Not only started raising her own children and her own family, but she started raising her siblings, which was about correct, I'm saying correct me if I'm wrong, as if my family's here. They had, I think, like 21 or 23 siblings, and my grandmother was the eldest one. So she was the caretaker for them, along with my nana and tata when they're at work, making sure they're going to school or doing what they needed to do. And my mother is a high school graduate. However, she did not go on to college, and my father is not a high school graduate. So I guess I would be considered a first generation college student, which sort of again, as everybody I'm sure experienced, had a hard time navigating, especially if you always had a hard time in school. I feel like I did everything like the total opposite, and a lot of it was literally me reacting because I either saw an issue in the classroom or in the school. For example, colorism is very real in Guahan, and especially within the Chukis or Palauan communities. And I was very vocal as a young kid, and I didn't know the word advocate or, mentor or whatever back then, but it was exactly what I was doing at a young age. With that, yeah. So yeah, eventually I got kicked out of George Washington High School at 16 years old, and from there I sort of just started, you know, not really doing anything. My grandmother, she was like very, very disappointed, to the point where, like, she was a little silent, but then also like, she was like, well, it's cool that you're here because you can like be my nurse or like take care of me. And she still accepted me for what it was, but I know that she was very, she really had high hopes for me to go into school because she saw the cool stuff that I was doing in the village and in the community. So yeah, that's when I eventually moved out to the United States at 18, and I challenged myself to go back by going into adult high school, which is where I was trying to get my high school diploma. And I was very much struggling every time I signed up to go into adult high school. I always quit or I never went back. And I guess Guam's solution for children, for juveniles, as they call it, was sending them to adult high school. But if you have students there that their parents or peer or adults are not really around to push them, you're just gonna fall through the cracks. So fast forward with that, a part of my educational experience is to also find peers and youth who go through domestic violence, substance abuse, suicide, being in a single parent household, which was weird for me because that's something that I was struggling with, but I never really knew how to help myself. I think I went through a lot of self-sabotage throughout the years, but I was very, very passionate and like so wisdomous to help others. But when it came to myself again, I wasn't really applying it there. So as I was growing up, I was in those poverty level environments, but it wasn't like poverty of food or poverty of water. It was emotional and family poverty. There's 3 catastrophic burdens in childhood that can drive lifelong inequality, which is income poverty through the lack of the basic survival, thriving, and reaching one's potential. There's discrimination or inclusion based on race, gender, disability, for an example. And there's also emotional poverty, also known as ACEs, which is the absence of the basic nurturing and protective parental relationships due to violence, neglect, or dysfunctional parenting. And I very much see that I was a part of that poverty. But again, it wasn't on any of the other ways I was very much taken care of. It was a lot of the emotional poverty for me, but a lot of my peers and classmates around me, I saw were going through all this different income poverty, discrimination, and exclusion. So it's very cool for me to see the Chamorro pathways through higher education, focusing on decolonizing, demystifying, and discovering, because that's me. So if you're looking for it, that's me, and that's a lot of the peers that I've worked with. So yeah, just to move on, a part of my passions is educating social stigmas with lived experiences. All my life, my lived experiences and my peers and my environment was the number one thing that I saw was a lack of belief in self. The high pressures of meeting a timeline for completing goals and certain ways. And if it wasn't matched to this idea, we would quit and we would get discouraged. And I very much saw high numbers of that in Guahan and in Micronesia in general, especially throughout the outer islands where there's not really much access. So I'm very much dedicated to empowering family and friends and communities and the people that God sent along my path, to believe in themselves. And one of the ways I'm doing that is through podcasting stories of lived experiences. This is not just a podcast space that I hold or a podcast episode. We're literally working to build up people's confidence in the Micronesian community, to believe in themselves and to show others that it's okay. A lot of us tend to self-mute ourselves, like I did throughout my early childhood, or we're also silenced as well. So it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to speak up and to show up as well. Most of the people that come on the podcast, they have a hard time with like last minute wanting to cancel because of nervousness or fear of like what they're going to share. I've had people like completely cancel and not reach out, but most of the people communicated to me. And so one of the things that I would tell them when they're having a hard time was that, like, I respect your choices. If you would like to reschedule, or if this is not your time, I'm really asking you to do a lot, which is going through traumas and life experiences. But the number one thing I let them know was like, there are actually people out there who truly believe that they cannot, or that they will not, due to somebody else planting that in our mind. And usually when I share that, they usually come on and they usually share those experiences. So I'm so grateful, and I'm so honored that people can actually come on and want to share their lived experiences to help somebody else. So yeah, to close, today, this is my second year studying early childhood development, adolescent growth and development, and now sociology. Sociology is my life, and working with people is my life as well, but also tying it into how we communicate and work together in a society is something that I want to study, and I want to learn in a more indigenous way, in a more way of following our cellular structure, which is our nervous system, also known as our intuition as well. So yeah, I volunteered with like a service learning in the child development center at the community college. A lot of it was to learn about it, but it was also just to volunteer for the sake of volunteering. And yeah, I just wanted to close with some advice from challenges that I went through in school. So one of those, I'll share two of them. So the first one is, education is important, but it's not as important as the ancient wisdom embedded within your DNA. Our ancestors navigated open waters with stars and the wind. That amplifies myself, because again, for a long time, because I didn't have the books or didn't go to the schools or didn't pass the test or anything like that, I truly believe that I could not, and I would not, and I should not. That's why I was getting very emotional when Mia was saying those affirming words, because she was speaking to the inner child in me, and this inner child is still healing through education. And I also wanted to share that you are not your traumas and your life experiences. They will shape you and they will change you. They will stretch you in unlimited ways. But just remember that you are the author of this story, and you can write a new page at any time. Even though no one has done this before you or around you, which in this case is education, you can do whatever you put your mind to. That's not just a quote. It's not just something to say. It's really a belief. Life will throw you adversities, but remember that you are the creator. You decide who will help you, what you can do, when you accomplish your goals, where you want to explore, and how that all looks like. So I know I said I'll shave off time, but whoops. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody that has been supporting the CHamoru Pathways to Higher Education, but most of all supporting Tiha Antoinette. I always let Tiha know that she's my Tiha Madrina at a time where I was like really hurting through the pandemic. I let her know that I like fell down to the ground and I was kneeling to God and I was asking him to send me somebody because I just couldn't do it. And it was so cool that Mia had those visuals of pictures of Masakata, because God sent me Masakata in a time where I was like deeply struggling. And they sent me Tiha as well to help me with school. So thank you. Hugwaitahau.
Chelsea, you speak nothing but the truth. This was very Thank you for sharing all of that. We are so empowered by you, and I cannot wait to see all of the amazing things that you do and you continue to do. And I agree. I think, you know, God and the universe sends us these people, sends us these spaces because we belong to, we share story and we find community through this way, regardless of the hardships that our people have endured. And my heart is overflowing with love right now. Sizos Maasi. Okay, I am so excited to hear from Mikaline Marie Menogogwi. She is a third-year Pacifica Studies major at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Mikaline, take it away.
Hey, Todos. I'm actually a fourth year.
Fourth year.
I'm graduating this semester, so it's very exciting.
Oh,
thank you. So, Kwakusi Makilamri Menogogwi, this is my diasporic journey to higher education. So I first wanted to talk about my migration story. So Tatagwa Hanzu from the village of Imatak, but my dad's also from Hangwahan and he's from Ordet. But I do more identify with my mom's side, so that's Imatak village. I come from Familion, Chebets and Pas, Kiriaku. But right before I turned 1 year old, I live right next to a road, so you guys might hear some noise, so it's Spencer. My dad enlisted in the Air Force right before I turned 1 year old, so I moved to Japan, England, Alaska, California, and then finally Hawaii for my higher education. But throughout that time, I did go to 10 different primary schools, so that's elementary, middle, and high school. And then one of those also was an early college program, so I got a jump start on some university credits for a semester, but unfortunately I did have to move that next semester to a different school, but I did get to have some early college experience. And you guys can see some of my pictures from Alaska on the top two, and then finally California, because I thought they were really nice. So I do currently attend the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm a senior student, and I came to this university for a majority of reasons. So for one, cultural experience. I did move away from Guahan from when I was like a baby, so I didn't really remember what it was like to live on an island, and I really kind of wanted to regain that, especially because I had no roots in other places. So I felt like a calling to Hawaii. Additionally, my major, I'm studying Pacific Island Studies, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. But my first introduction into different Pacific cultures was through dance. And so I joined Pacific Bloom, which was in Alaska, where I learned like about different cultures such as like Samoan, Tahitian, Hawaiian, Maori. And I was amazed at how many different cultures that our region has. And I felt like a true calling to like learn more about it. And I also joined a Halau Hula in California, where I learned even more. And then also our university offers CHamoru language. And so that was one of my main reasons why coming here too, because I wanted to learn my language and also learn more about myself and my history. So Pacific Island Studies is a program that talks about the history and contemporary issues, as well as geography of the region. And so we go over a lot of things, such as like the nuclear bombings and tests at Bikini Atoll, or even the illegal Hawaiian overthrow. And I was really interested in this because when I joined that Halau Hula, I was taught about the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and I had completely no knowledge about that beforehand. And I was amazed how no one had taught me before, and I barely knew anything about Guam besides my own family stories. And I felt like this personal calling to learn more, not only for myself, but also for my family, to help educate them as well as my future family. Additionally, I've been very privileged to be a part of a lot of cool opportunities, including in that middle picture, I was on this panel of other Micronesian scholars talking about a perspective on this really big issue in our region at the time. And I also got to meet Kathy Jetno-Kilsner, who's this amazing Marshallese poet, and she's also in that picture. And it was really awesome to learn about her and actually get to meet her in person. And then also for my entire time in undergrad, I've been volunteering at the Micronesian Youth Summit, which is this youth summit we put on every year for Micronesian middle schoolers and high schoolers, teaching them about high school and making them excited about their culture, as well as any opportunities that they can get after graduating high school. So I also was on a panel for that, talking about my experience as a military dependent and also like the effects of the military. So it was really fun to do that. And then one of my favorite experiences, I volunteered at a legal clinic where I helped people fill out forms for naturalization to become on the pathway to becoming a US citizen. And that was like my favorite thing ever, because I actually felt like I was making genuine change and helping a lot of people, because I think I got to help like over 20 people fill out those forms, and it's really lengthy. It was like 40 pages each. And most of them, like English was their second language. And so I was being very meticulous and gentle with them as best as I could. And it was really awesome. So as I mentioned, I am in my senior year, so I'm doing my capstone project, and it is focusing around exploring diasporic Chamorro use of online spaces and social media. So basically, this entire Pathways panel and event. So I will be exploring ideas of identity, community activism, trans-Pacific organizations, and more. Also focusing on my two co-founded organization, the Chamorro Association of the Midwest, where I've gotten to interview a whole bunch of great people, amazing Chamorros, including Tia. And so I've been really fortunate about that. And I'm excited to complete it, hopefully this semester. So sorry if I'm speeding through really fast. I've got anxiety, so some of my challenges I've been through. Number one, being imposter syndrome. I know we talked about that kind of in that first panel, but I've definitely felt it, especially being someone who doesn't really have roots anywhere. And then also being a military dependent, I felt the firsthand the benefits of the military, but also I'm very critical of the military in the United States in general. So I kind of been put in a rock and a hard place when talking about these conversations because I'm just genuinely in the middle of it. Additionally, I have a hard time connecting to space and belonging. So that's something I've been working on through giving myself gratification, similar to what Mia was doing. So I really appreciate her saying that as well, because it's really gratifying to hear things like that, because I struggle with it all the time. As well as a settler relationship, I am aware that I'm in Kanaka Maoli lands in Hawaii, and I've been educating myself on the history as well as their voices and trying to give them the space to talk about their issues. And then lastly, I honestly didn't know I was going to talk about this that much, but feeling so inspired by all the other panelists and everyone in this amazing event, I have struggled with mental health like my entire life. And there was a time in high school where I didn't even think I was going to like make it past high school. Now I'm in my like senior year. Oh, I'm going to cry.
You're fine.
About to graduate.
You're fine, Mikaeline. We're here, every single one of us is wrapping our arms around you and loving you right now. You're safe here. You're safe with us. We love you. You're safe with us. We see you. You're safe with us. It's okay. It's okay. All right. So
really
what's the saying? Speak your truth, even and maybe especially when your voice is shaking. You are safe here. We love you and we see you. So take a deep breath. All right, pretend you're gonna go. Hey, you need to laugh. Look what I did to my bangs, right? And I'm showing up with my terrible bang. I did this like 3 days ago, and it's like I wonder if it's gonna be really tragic on Saturday, and it is. So look, I should be crying, and I'm not. It's just hair. You are safe here with us. We see you. So take a deep breath. Everybody, why doesn't everybody take a deep breath, right? Take a deep breath. I'm going to steal a page from Chelsea, who's always, everybody take a deep breath. Count in for 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then let it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I want you to pretend that you're in your bedroom and you're on Zoom and you're just talking story. You're just talking story with us. You're safe here. You're safe here. Okay. So pull yourself all the way up. You are Unhagan Fa'una. You are a daughter of Fa'una. And then imagine, okay, let's try something else. You're going out to perform, right? You pull yourself up, right? Look at Tia's hair. Look at my bangs. I mean, this is tragic. What you're talking about is not tragic. It's beautiful. So I think Si Serena for talking about imposter syndrome. I thank all of you who have talked before. I thank Chelsea who makes it her mission to make these conversations open and comfortable. We see you, you are safe with us. Okay, so why don't you finish up your last piece, Nana? Okay. All right, we're right here. I'm going to stay on with you. We're right here. I'm going to keep my Clarence keeps muting me. I said I'm going to pinch him. I'm right. I'm going to stay on the mic with you. Okay, babe. Go ahead and finish up, please.
Yeah, I was kind of making this speech in my head when everyone else was talking, so it was a little hard for me to just like do it.
That's okay.
But as I mentioned, there's a point in high school I didn't really think I was gonna make it past it. And I'm like a true example that it does get better, and that you can make it past it. Make sure you get good coping mechanisms. I definitely rely on like art and music, and that definitely helps me. And also connections. I know many of the panelists have talked about that, but allowing yourself to go into groups with other powerful people who help uplift you, similar to what just happened, it's really meaningful, and it definitely helps you feel more valid, especially in spaces that you feel like you don't belong. And yeah, it's just the things that help make us be better in these types of spaces. And adding upon that, I wanted to say that it's really important to never give up. I always challenge myself, even though I do have a bit of speech anxiety, as you guys can see, to constantly try and get better at things that you may not be like in your favorite things, on your comfort zone. And also being in higher education, those spaces aren't necessarily made for us. But the more of us that there is in these spaces, it'll become more comfortable for our future generations and our future families. And it's just important for us to make those steps, to take those steps and to carve out the roads for everyone else. Additionally, ask for help. You're not alone. I've definitely had to rely a lot on my family and friends, even groups such as this one, because it's very easy to feel alone, especially when I was in high school. I was in a school that was 90% like white, and it was really lonely. I was like the only brown kid in my band class, and so having groups of powerful women or people of color, it definitely helps. And also rest. I experienced a lot of burnout, especially during COVID. And it's really important to not just prioritize school, but also prioritize your own mental well-being, and make sure you live your life alongside getting a better education. And then I also wanted to add this amazing quote that I learned in my major from Health is our sea of islands. But we should not be defined by the smallest of our islands, but by the greatness of our oceans. We are not just a tiny little island in the Pacific or a tiny little group of islands. We are a great sea of islands that are all connected through the ocean. Whether in your diaspora or whether you're on home islands, you are valid, and we come from navigators, which is super cool, you know? So it's everything for us to just be able to make our own spaces and to know that we are not defined by what the other groups talk about us. We make our own definitions, and we get to determine what we're called by. So, Saina Maasi para Toru.
Biba, everybody unmute and give a Biba to this amazing panel. This amazing panel. Sitsius Mase Toratsamsu, Huguaitza Hamzu. I've been advised running a little bit behind. So, and I think it might be a good time for us to take a bio break, or just everyone go and breathe a little. Micheline, go get some water. You did great. Everybody got through it. Again, laugh about my bangs. They are tragic. That's tragic. What you all have shared with all of us is beautiful. So with that, Clarence, we are going to take an intermission. Are we on schedule for our intermission? During the intermission, there's a special Manana tribute that Situmika Velarde, who is another panelist, put together. Are we ready to roll that during the bio break? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then when we come back, we're going to do a Mentimeter thing, which I've had to learn about. I'm a nanny boomer, so this is all new to me. So these brilliant young people have been teaching me. So Christine, what's our parameters for a break, Nan?
We're going to take it down from 10
Okay.
minutes to about 5 to 7, just so we can keep it moving.
Okay.
And give other panelists some time to also.
So do we have a hard start time?
Yeah,
So,
if we start now at 3:05, if we can have everybody back by 3:10, that'd be fantastic. And that's 3:10 Eastern, so 12:10 Pacific.
right. And that's 3:10, not Chamorro time, right? So, so please, come along, take a little break, and everything was so beautiful and beyond my wildest dreams. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Micheline.
Yeah, I just,
Right, go ahead,
I just
please.
want to make sure we don't lose any attendees. Please be sure to come back. We'll have a presentation in the meantime and an announcement of prizes as well.
Yay, prizes. Okay,
All right.
Chelsea. Thank you, Micheline.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
just
go ahead,
I
please.
just want to make sure we don't lose any attendees. Please be sure to come back. We'll have a presentation in the meantime and an announcement of prizes.
Yay, prizes. Okay.
See through.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure we don't lose any
Yay, prizes.
See through. Beat me and mommy si tus maosi para todo si tu vida me tu inagradeci si tu todo vida me tu.
Okay, this is Tia. I'm calling you back to the table, Nye. Mila, return. Put. Come on. This is what's great about getting older. You can boss people around, well, not a little bit. All right, there we are. I'm seeing your faces. Biba. All right, so we are about 30 minutes behind, but unfortunately, in terms of a programming update, it looks like we have not been able to connect with see Mikhail Cruz Phelps on the island, who was trying to submit an audio video recording. He's an archaeologist and extremely cool. So if we can get that audio up at a later time, we will do so and make it available to you on our website. We're also, I'm not sure, Taylani, has anyone seen Alex Munoz? Not yet. So we are holding him in our hearts and hope that he is well, and sending our Gwenaitza out to your Chelu and my Sobrino. So always, think not the worst, think the best of people and pray for them. So with that means we're going to pick up a little bit of time, but before we go back, and Clarence, are you there? And see Christine? I told them not on Chamorro time on B.
We're here.
Okay, well, I want to see your beautiful faces.
Oh.
So at this point, there we are. So let's come back in if you can. We are doing something special. And again, Taylani was and Christine also last year was one of the people who sort of urged me to sort of think about introducing this new component. And there is a way in which the theme of this year's second webinar, fall webinar, is really sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, meaning our ancestors, and our Mañana and our Mangatsum. So with that, I'm going to turn it over quickly to Tamika, who's this is our intermission programming, if you will. And then Christine also has something to share that's exciting. And then we'll move it back to, we're going to do a little exercise to get we're going to use the Mentimeter, which I find to be a really exciting kind of option where we can get audience participation and some feedback. But first I'm going to turn it over to Tamika Velarde, who is responsible for creating the Mañana Magatsan tribute slideshow. So Tamika, if you want to take it over from here.
Thank you. Buenas, Guahusi Tamika Velarde, Familian Dagus and Bakalu, Tautau Agate. I am coming to you guys today from Haudenosaunee land, Western New York. And as kind of I'm presenting later, so I'll tell you more about myself later, but as a welcome back, we're gonna do a little question with the Mentimeter. Okay. All right, so if you guys can grab your phones, you can use the QR code reader and scan the QR code and it'll take you to the Mentimeter website. or you can go to www.menti.com and enter this code here. And I'll just give you a second to do that. So I'll do it. You can also go on your computer to menti.com. Okay, so hopefully you all are there. Thank you, Mia, for putting it in the chat. Oops. Let's see. So from the presentations up to this point, I would like to know, what are your key takeaways? So you should see on your phone a place to enter. So please enter some of the takeaways from the presentation so far. And they should start to show up. Wow, I love this. We are worthy, you belong, togetherness, community support, sharing story. We are capable, respectu, our indigeneity matters, grounding, belonging, resilience, inspired, love. I love all these. Thank you so much for sharing. It looks like a couple more are still coming in. Okay, so if you want to, you can have these sent to yourself. Oh, more. Unique pathways, time together. Our ancestors are proud, proud. I love this. Okay, as Clarence said in the beginning, there's going to be some prizes. Let's see if this, it's not going forward. Okay, there we go. So here's a picture of some of the prizes that are gonna be in the giveaway. We have like some wall hangings, and there's an oven mitt, and also a CHamoru and English prayers and poetry book, and a Jeff's Pirates Cove Guam bandana. I believe that's what that is. So just as a reminder, before we get back going again, if you could please share, like, comment, visit us on Facebook and Instagram, and visit CHamoruPathways.org. You can see our presentation there, and also interact with some more information about Chamorro businesses and other things that are going on. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to the next panelist.
Hafide buenas inanhu si Taylani Camacho Tauta Saipendu Lo Dumonklutu Guinea Gi Kumi Island, San Diego, California. I familiaku mas matengonia as familian Sai Ballings and me. Hi everyone, my name is Taylani Camacho. I am from Saipan, but I grew up on Kumi Islands here in San Diego, California. My family is known as Familian Sai Ballings and me, from the villages of San Roque, Atugao, and Talankanoa. I am from the village of Cagman 1. I'm really nervous, so I'm gonna pause and breathe really quick. But I'm really excited to say that I'm really grounded, and I have so much love for the folks who have shared their stories before me. And I'm also excited to be on this webinar to share also about a little bit about my experiences and migration story coming over here to California. So we came over here when I was a young girl, breaking generational curses. And then the abridged version is for education. My pathway to education, higher education, actually started when I was 14 years old. I was dually enrolled in high school and also taking community college classes. At the age of 20, I graduated with my bachelor's from Cal State San Marcos with criminology and justice studies. And then at the age of 23, I graduated with my master's in sociological practice, and again from Cal State San Marcos. Currently, I'm a program coordinator with Empowering Pacific Islander Communities, also known as EPIC. And I would like to say that I'm very blessed and thankful that I get to see my education in action through the work that I do. Alongside my Pacifica siblings, our QT and BIPOC community, I continue to dream for our liberation on both macro and micro levels. But enough about me. I have the honor to chair our Gwigwifi or Gwinifi Dreamers panel. We have a robust group of Chamorro dreamers who have completed their degrees and are currently pursuing careers in a variety of exciting fields. With that, I'd like to share that we have our Masakata members, Jay Quintanilla, who is a financial manager over at Intel, and Maria Jesus, who is a botanist whose passion intertwines environmental conservation and mentorship. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to them to share their stories and their journeys. And then if time allows us, we will have a Q&A post the panel session. Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and get started if you all can hear me okay. I'm just going to share my screen and pop into a presentation. So as this is coming up, I just wanted to thank everyone who is here attending and all of the folks who have pitched in and really helped to organize things. I think it's been, a wonderful experience for not only those attending, but those of us who are volunteering and helping out. I think the committee has done a really great job. Oops, sorry about that. All of my clicking went through. Okay, let's see if that reset. Are you guys still able to see that first slide? Perfect. All right. My name is Juan Quintanilla. I'm better known as Jay Tserle. And I'm really, just excited to be here today, again, sharing the space with a lot of really inspirational folks. I wanted to start off by basically talking a little bit about my history, kind of my experience. And I grew up originally on Guam. Both my parents were born and raised on Guam, but I myself was born in California, and then they flew me over to Guam when I was little. I grew up in the village of Agate, which is on the southern side of the island in an area known as Talaifak. And, from there, I think in the earliest days, my parents were teaching me the value of being able to think and being able to pursue an education, the value of an education. They always instilled in me and in all of my cousins that, hard work is what you need to progress. And I really saw that not only in what they did, but also, in the way that they influenced the rest of my family. From the time I was little, before I could read or write, I would see my parents sitting at the kitchen table tutoring, my first cousins, or even, my nieces and nephews, the kids of my first cousins, and helping them through school and encouraging them, not to give up. And I think that was really a beautiful thing for me to see at a young age, because it made me think that, as long as you tried, you could really do anything. Reality does, set in over time, and some things are harder than others for us, but I still do carry that belief with me wherever I go. After growing up in Guam, I moved to Washington on Suquamish land, really in Port Orchard. And I went there for two reasons. One reason was that the high schools in the States were always perceived to be better than the ones on Guam, whether that was, public or private. And I also went because they said, oh, you should go and establish residency so that, when you start school, right, you'll be able to pay in-state tuition. And we'll get back to that later. But, I spent my time really in Washington with my family, going through high school and connecting with Chamorros. And it was a very easy way to ramp out into living in the States. I connected with a lot of folks from Tinen and Saipan who I was fortunate enough, helped me learn and practice my Chamorro. But after high school, I moved to Oregon and I went to undergrad at Oregon State University. I got my bachelor's in nuclear engineering there, and I got my master's in business. And I've been in Oregon since then. So I've been in Oregon now a little over 15 years, just really, working and studying. And, this is now where I think of as my home away from home. So I live currently in the Portland area on Clackamas land, adjacent to, the Atfalati traditional homelands as well. And yeah, so, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my journey to school. And, with this slide change, the view here is from the back seat of my car, and I'm there in the passenger seat. But my Auntie Jo is the one that's driving the car, and my mom was in the back. She's the one that took the picture. But this was really them literally driving me to school, for the first time, because Oregon State was probably 4 or 5 hours away from Port Orchard. So, it was drivable, it was local in that sense. But it was really, surreal in looking back, because I spent a lot of my life with my parents driving me to and from school on Guam. And, it was kind of fitting that this is how I went off to college as well, with, my auntie, my mom driving me, and kind of seeing me off in that way. And going to school is something like a lot of the panelists have shared. It was always encouraged, but more so it was really expected. It wasn't a negotiable thing, for me to go to college, or for me to at least try the college experience. And I was a first generation college student. So, my parents, my dad had taken, one community college class right before they left California, but my parents really, had never gone through a 4-year program, had never been really in an institution like that. And so it was a very different experience for our family. And I think, like a lot of folks have mentioned, there were more questions than answers at the end of the day. We really had to kind of figure our way through it, together, and they helped me how they could, right? My mom was always willing to get on the phone and chase down a question or try to figure something out. But I think Emily was the one that mentioned, the power of getting on Google and figuring things out, right? How do I write, my personal statement? What do I look for in a program? And I'm really appreciative, just for their support in seeing that through. But I know that for a lot of folks, it's really overwhelming, and, everything is really new. I thought at that time I had to have it all figured out before I showed up at school, picking my career, picking my major, choosing my institution. And, I think that was really a challenging feeling, right? But at the end of the day, it was something that the gentle nudges of my family, or the demands of my family, really made me, push out and try. I think when we think about school, we think, oh, okay, you have to go and do all these tests, you have to get in, you have to apply. And that's all very true, right? But there's a lot of stuff along the way that I learned after the fact. For example, I mentioned moving to Washington, to establish residency for cheaper tuition. I ended up going to Oregon State, and I didn't find out really until my second year there, when I was paying closer attention, that I had to pay out of state tuition the whole time. And that was a really big challenge, but it was something where my mom said, hey, it's okay, we'll figure out a way, right? And that figuring out a way really meant trying to get scholarships that I could from the school, getting any financial aid that was need-based that I could sort out, and then taking on loans. And I'm still working through paying those off, but I took on a good amount of debt just to get through school. And there are a lot of things that, we just didn't know any better at the time, right? Or I didn't know to look for. But I think the reality is that going through it is really what matters the most, right? When I was there, I got my undergrad. I wanted to go into grad school. I was applying to technical programs, and every program that I found, the ones that I got into, I couldn't really get all the funding I needed. And so I said, okay, I can stay here. I can do, a master's degree, and then I can work for a while. And my mom, I'll always remember, she was like, I don't know if you should work, once you try the money, you're not going to want to go back to school. Short story is, she was right. I've been working now for, about 9 years. I haven't gone back to school after getting my MBA, but I still want to, I think that that's something where a couple of the stories you've heard are people returning to school or going to school for the first time. I think don't be discouraged in thinking that, you have to get it all done at once. You always have room to go back. Part of paying for school for me meant working. And I was really fortunate with the family that I had. This is my mom here with me. We started a business when I was in high school, actually, making stickers, making shirts, and selling at different village fiestas in Washington. This particular occasion, we were down in at the San Roque Fiesta in California. I think it was down in San Diego. And, it was really that experience of making and selling stickers, of getting support from the community. That was my spending money through most of my early years at college. And then, as I got into my third year, I had some RA jobs that allowed me to pay for room and board, and also, got me at least established enough that I could feel comfortable with, again, the loans that I was taking on at the end of the day. Coming out and graduating, I, like I said, rolled from my bachelor's into a master's of business. And I thought it was just going to be a credential that I picked up and, continued on with. But as I went through that program, I realized business is really what I enjoyed doing. It was something that, was always there in the ether. It ran in my family, but it was something that I loved to do. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to stick with it. After I graduated, though, it was really hard to find a job, actually. I got some part-time work with a startup working on, commercialization of their technology, but I spent about 6 months trying to find something, and I was getting really discouraged. And I would always just have my mom in my ear, again, telling me, it's okay, why don't you just go and try this? One of the things that she suggested was a career fair at school right after I graduated. And that's how I connected to Intel. My degrees got me kind of the interview, they got me in the door, and I was able, to land the job, and I've been working there now for 9 years. It's been a wonderful experience. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what I do. The folks, obviously, who are coordinating can put you in touch with me if you want to learn more about what it's like to work in corporate finance, or what it's like to be a part of, a really large company, right, as a Chamorro and as a Pacific Islander. I'll just say, similar to a lot of the support networks that folks have found in school, we have smaller, resource communities and groups at work where Pacific Islanders can connect, where Chamorros can connect. And I think that's where, a sense of identity or a sense of place can help. But obviously, you do lean on the networks that you have, right, even heading into it. The one network I wanted to call out is the Chamorro Learning Network. And, when I was in college, I was really into learning the language, applying the language. At the time, the first buildup was going on Guam with site selection for a live firing range at Pagat, which is an ancient village site. It's also a protected home for some of the Mariana butterflies. And that was my first experience of, Chamorro activism and really countering buildup and militarization back home. And I was really fired up. Like I mentioned, we heard Set talk about founding from Moksaidzan, and it was around that time where I was paying attention for the first time to a lot of the issues going on. And it was beautiful to see. And for me personally, I got really engaged for the first couple of years, but the grind of school, of undergrad, of grad school, of getting into work, over time, it built up a loss that I didn't feel fully until it was kind of too late. There's the analogy of boiling a frog and the frog not feeling it until it's gone. And that was really what happened to me. I had lost really my drive, my passion, my engagement in the Chamorro community. And that was okay. I was sad about it when I realized it, but I didn't realize it until I was already reconnecting with Chamorros, and I found a renewed sense. So, now I think I was fortunate to connect with T. Antoinette, a lot of the members, like Joni of the Masakata Collective, and they've been really beautifully, right, nurturing folks and reconnecting folks across the world at the end of the day. And I think that's been a lovely experience for all of us. I have this little cartoon clip up here on the side. I'm going to play it. It's about 30 seconds, but I think Tantonet would shoo me off the stage if I didn't at least include this bit of work, right? It was a project that we did last year. That, you know, this was a clip from a show called Avatar, and it was basically a quick dub into Chamorro. So I'm just going to play this really quick and I'll pick up after.
Do you need to start again and make sure you're sharing your sound?
Sorry.
Hi, Day, the nanny boomers reminding the millennials. This is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for you.
Thank
But
you.
you
I
were right. I
appreciate
would
the
have had your
embarrassment.
head. I would have had your head. So let's try it again one more time.
All
One more
right.
time with feeling.
Mo hulog kanay mo dyan iapagot mo, pues papa para itijan mo. Itijan mo na guaha kinalamtin kita tau-tau. Mafanaan gui itasinsi. Dyan para guaho mampus tadudung itasi. Kininitijan, uncaloni hulu talo dyan hujang yochu na kanay mo. Kufimputanti hinanaw tujan. Samun sedi na uhonaw ilamlam gi kurason mo. Sapikno.
So yeah, you know, this was a piece, like I said, it was a short project for the language class that we were in, but I think the story behind it for me is really about the importance of reimagining the ways that we can use our language. And, you know, the message actually in the clip is really important, right? Talking about redirecting energy, you know, channeling it in a different way. And I think for me, that really has meant a renewed love and interest in helping spread Chamorro and the Chamorro language. And I'm really just grateful for all of the connections that have come together to make that happen. So again, we can get in touch after, you know, for folks that are interested, and the Mesocata Collective will be pushing out more resources and language learning opportunities for folks with time. So with that, I want to just wrap up quickly. Oops. I just want to wrap up quickly with some of the words that my mom would always say to me along my journey. And, you know, these are things I think whether you have a mom or not, this is really useful advice. She would always say, well, how would you like it if I did this to you, right? If I pinched you, or if I, you know, said these words to you. And it was really her way of calling you out for being an asshole. And that was, you know, something I heard a lot, not only to me, but to the rest of my family as a kid. And it was really about teaching respect. She would also, you know, talk about the possibility of things, encouraging you to, you know, why don't you just try this? Why don't you just go to the career fair? Why don't you just visit campus, right? And I actually found a lot of that possibility thinking is something that I carry forward. And then lastly, you know, she loved this phrase as I was growing up. She used to tell me, hey, as long as you're here, you won't starve, right? You can go out and pick fruit, you can go out and catch fish. And I didn't realize it until much later, but this was her talking about, you know, the abundance of life. And it's not to dismiss, you know, the fact that food scarcity is real, that food access is a problem, that food deserts exist. But it was really, truly, you know, traditional knowledge and wisdom of saying, hey, everything we need in the world is provided. So we don't have to fight each other to get it. We can share, we can find ways to help. So yeah, I'll leave you with that. And I'm way over time, but thank you so much again for the opportunity to share.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Oh, sorry. Tia, I saw your box light up. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. Proceed, please. Por favor.
Okay, yeah, no, I think I just wanted to make one comment. I think one thing that was resonating with me was like the idea of demystifying higher education, and just watching the Avatar clip. Sometimes when there's unintentional like opportunities that come from going to higher education, and with that,
I was sitting with more of like the connections higher education has brought for our community. But with that being said, thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to Maria.
Hi, everyone. Wow, I have been resonating with so much of what everyone's been sharing. I'm excited to go back and watch the recording. But let's see, let me get started. I'm gonna share my screen, so just bear with me here while I get this set up. Can you all see that? Thumbs up? All right, thanks. So Hafide Guahusi Maria Jesus, Familian Badu. My name is Maria. I was born in Seattle, Washington, and I'm currently living in Bishop, California. This is my dad's side of the family, Badu clan. My dad and his relatives are from Assen. My dad's the youngest of 10. And he, after he graduated high school, he got sent to go live with his brothers in Seattle because, well, I won't say why because this is being recorded, but needless to say, my family is amazing and I was lucky to grow up with so many of my relatives as a child. Here's a picture of my mom. She's from the Seattle area. My dad met her when he moved here. My sibling, Allison, who's in the audience. Thanks for joining, Allison. You should come back again. And then more of my siblings, my grandpa Badu, my dad, and niece and nephew. So interestingly, my dad, my aunts and uncles, a lot of them have been very successful without going to college. So just shout out to that. My dad works at Microsoft. He runs their model shop in hardware. So I also have to talk about my grandma Badu and my grandma Cuckoo. I gave her a clan name because she didn't have one and everyone called her that. But both of these very strong women loved plants. And I'm a botanist. So I think I inherited both my first name, Maria, and my love for plants from them. Even though I didn't know it, it took me a really long time to figure out that botany was my thing. And Tia Antoinette said when we were setting up, she's like, what is a botanist? What does a botanist even do? So first I want to say pretty much all of us have ancestors, relatives who were botanists. If you wanted to live on the planet, you had to be a botanist. You had to know how to find food. You had to know how to make medicine. And that meant knowing how to recognize plants and knowing their name and knowing their qualities and building a relationship with them. And so that's basically what I do. I know the plant names. And so I work out on the land. I've worked a lot with the national parks on various public lands. And because not many people these days have knowledge of the plants, that's my specialty. So I go out into the landscape, identify what's there, and tell the decision makers their status and make recommendations for conservation or for wildlife, because we all depend on plants, right? Plants are the foundation of life. So it took me, I just wanted to touch on this one other thing. Speaking of shy, people have talked about how they're shy, they've had anxiety. This was totally me. I pretty much didn't speak to anybody outside of my family or a few friends as a kid. I could not talk. My voice just stopped working. And so it's been quite a journey for me as I've gotten older to find my voice, especially through graduate school. Believe it or not, I ended up on the front page of the LA Times. If you had told me as a kid that would happen, I wouldn't have thought that. So this is mostly thanks to my advisor, Dr. Naomi Fraga. She's a botany hero. But this is a picture of us looking for rare plant seeds because what she does is saves these seeds in long-term storage. So if these plants are threatened by extinction or development, it's a last kind of a safeguard so that the beautiful life that's out here can continue on. So just wanted to share that. That's a cool thing we did. So as I alluded to, I was a very late bloomer. It took me a long time to find my way. I started working when I was 13 years old, worked many jobs. I didn't even really plan on going to college, but a lot of my friends were going to college and they're like, hey, aren't you gonna go? I was like, okay. But my parents are like, well, you got to pay for it. So I went to community college in high school because it was free. And with the goal of getting a transfer degree and transferring to a university. but I felt a little lost. You know, my parents encouraged me to do what I loved, and I love to read books. Part of going along with not speaking, and when I went to fiestas, I would bring a book and sit in the corner. And so books were my friends. And so I studied English with the idea of being an English teacher, because that's the only profession that I had really known about. You know, but it turns out I just didn't resonate with it. And so I ended up dropping out of school after I finished my junior year, after transferring to University of Washington. I worked as an office person for 3 years and saved up money and bought a van and drove around the country, lived in my van. This was before you had GPS on phones, so I had to use a map. But through that experience, I was exposed to many different ways of life and many different career options. And so by the time I came back to Seattle, made the decision to return to school, because by that time there was a recession, jobs were competitive, and I had to have a bachelor's degree just to have a secretary job. So I went back to school. And in the back of my mind, though, I thought, I love being in nature. I wonder if there's something I can do. And so I happened to take a plant identification class my very last quarter, and I completely fell in love with that work. The only problem was it had taken me 10 years to get my bachelor's, and I did not want to go back to school. So I opted to find my way through internships, volunteerism. I lived in that van again for a few months to make ends meet. But I got to do what I love, and it was immensely satisfying. So over the course of 8 years, I worked my way up and eventually worked for the National Park Service, and then managed a program in Nevada and California on public lands. But there were still some doors that were closed to me. And so I decided to return to graduate school. Because I didn't have that science degree, there were some things I wanted to do where I needed that piece of paper. For me, though, I didn't want to go to school just for the piece of paper. And so I was fortunate to find a program that supported the type of research I do, even if I didn't get a degree. Not only that, but it was fully paid for. I didn't have to take out loans. So if anyone would like to talk about that, you can get in touch with me through the CHamoru Pathways email, and I'd be happy to share that information. Because yeah, it's amazing to be able to get a master's and not have debt. So, you know, along the way, you know, not only when I graduated, there were so many things I learned that I wish I had known in undergrad. And one is the importance of strong networks. And I think that's been emphasized so much in this panel. Beware, if you go to a big school, it's easy to get lost, and it's important to find your people. I was fortunate in grad school where it was a teeny tiny program, and that really helped me find connections. My advisor, Dr. Naomi Fraga, she is a first generation college graduate, and she knew what it's like to navigate these systems of applying for school, of writing grant proposals. I had never written a grant proposal, and she helped me write something like 10 successful grant proposals. That was a skill I didn't expect to get in grad school. So if you can find other people who've been through that journey on their own, you can be stronger together with those people. And again, it's never too late to go back to school. There's someone in my program who had retired and she went back to grad school. So it's possible. And not necessary though. You don't have to go to school to find your way, but it can certainly help. So just a few resources, ideas. One is just looking at job searches and then working backwards from the qualifications, or finding companies or organizations you'd like to look for, conduct informational interviews. Twitter is a great resource if you're interested in science. Famous scientists are very accessible and reachable. There's an account called Academic Secret Menu, and they have a whole list of how to navigate the public school system in their bio. And then finally, SACNAS. I didn't think I belonged in this group, but I met someone on their board who invited me to join, and they're amazing. They really center first generation grads and people from historically underrepresented communities. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And with that, I will finish up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I think I do want to close off this panel session with the idea of decolonizing higher education. And I think, Maria, just from the stories that you have shared right now, I thought one of the ways in doing so was like with life and that knowledge you can gain through doing things or like experiencing life like a different way, like van life. And then also sharing and listening to how your dad did not go that traditional route of obtaining a job. So just some of those thoughts that popped up and resonated with me. And then one of the things too about decolonizing is, as much as I love the panel specifically for Chamorros, but also highlighting what cross collaboration of cultures can look like, and our dependence on our other siblings outside of our Chamorro siblings. So thank you so much, Jay and Maria, for sharing. And then Tia, or if you have any questions, drop it in the chat, but Tia, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Okay. One of the things I noted and I really want to emphasize is how important the support of Mañana were in the stories for both Jay and Maria, and for many of us. One of the reasons, though, that we are trying to curate, that I've put emphasis and effort into this, is because, unfortunately, there's a way in which I would often tell students of color who I advised in higher ed that we are doing the work of the institutions. These institutions were not designed for us and with us in mind. And so we are doing for ourselves. And so these stories and storytelling is really, really critical, because when you hear someone's story, then all of a sudden their struggles to them at the time may have felt really punishing, but to us are very inspiring. And so you can integrate that into your own life, that I know I will. I think it's really important to anticipate that there will be struggles, right? Just learning how an institution works, learning how to find money, which is what Maria did, or Jay, your willingness to work hard. I mean, I think this is the other thing that frustrates me, is that we here are so vibing and inspired by each other's immense talent and intellect and resourcefulness. But unfortunately, academic gatekeepers don't know about us. So I think, to go to Taylani's point, yes, look for Pan-Pacific or Trans-Pacific, and depending on where you're located. For example, I'm located in the Midwest, and I was thrilled to find the Chamorro Association of the Midwest nearly 20 years after I'd lived in Ohio. So that was really important to me. But at the state level, to figure out how, who's holding the levers of power. And to quote, I think it was Shirley Chisholm, if no one is setting a placemat for you at their table, pull up your folding chair, sit down and share your knowledge. You will not always be invited in. Make space for yourself. This is what this webinar is doing. This is, again, I'm still new language learner, but as Chamorro, para Chamorro. As Chamorro siha, para Chamorro siha. By Chamorros, for Chamorros. But we do, in fact, look forward to being in coalition with a range of communities. And we'll see that we have similarities and differences, but even within this panel or this webinar, we've seen different pathways. One other thing I want to mention is, I remember when I was thinking about about age, and I was thinking about, should I go to graduate school? Because I'm going to be 30 something when I finish. Well, here was some wisdom that somebody threw down for me that I still appreciate. And for those of you who are thinking to go back or feeling like, oh gosh, I'm this age and I'm just starting my degree, you're going to be whatever age you are anyway. You may as well be 40, 27, 31, and working on your degree. So never give up, persevere. So we are finally moving into our final presentations, and we're mindful of time. And so I'm going to be chairing. I had to take over for Magetu Tuncap, and I'm happy to do it. Do we have that one piece of music that I did request, Clarence, by any chance? Otherwise, I'm going to have to sing, and that's not going to be pretty. So we are, this is let's push through on this last piece of time together. We will be sad actually when we finish, but I get that we're a little tired. So Clarence, can you play the song for us to get us moving again? Whenever you're ready. And if you don't mind, if you can show your faces on the screen so we can do a little bit of moving together. Myla, come on. Where'd you go, Jay, Shyler, Emily? Let's see your beautiful faces once Clarence gets this audio. Once Clarence gets this audio. Okay, there's my voice again. Ooh. Listen.
This is how we do it. This is how we do it.
Come on, Maria. Come on, don't let the old lady be the only one. Okay, you can turn it down. Come on, Maria. Come on. Come on, don't let the old lady be the only one. Come on, don't think about it. Where's Susanna? Come on. I know I'm gonna regret this, but my daughter is gonna be mortified. Sorry, Giselle. Okay, all right. Whew. All right, let's crank it up. This last session, last but not least, and this is how we do it. I had to ask for a translation from Silencio's father. So Taigueno Unsogwi, this is how we do it. In some ways, this is a really important, all of the panels are important. We shed tears with one another. Our hearts were warmed. We are inspired by each other's distinctive pathways. But there's a way in which, the fall webinar in particular is about focusing on admissions. Hence, this is how we do it, right? Taigueno Unsogwi, or the nitty-gritty of our pathway into higher education. I want to mention, I'm going to put this into the chat, that again, we did last fall have take what we called, it was kind of part two of our webinar in the fall, and I'm going to put this in the chat if I can. We called it the deep dive into college admissions. I was happy to collaborate with Saina, Anita Borja on Island, who I was thrilled to learn is also my prima. And is the Magahaga of UOG. We also were happy to have talk story with Dr. Lawrence Camacho, and finally to invite into the deep dive webinar, the head of financial aid at University of Guam. And so if you access, and this link is already up, I believe, on our website, but if you want to get a really sort of a deep dive, it's exactly that, it's a deep dive with a professional from financial aid, not that our panelists aren't fantastic, right? But this is a much briefer overview. This is a brief overview of the Common App, or what we know as the Common Application. Financial aid, which I think it's important, again, to demystify, is free, the federal application for free student aid, right? And for a lot of first generation students, or would be, and it sounds like, again, the resourcefulness of folks like Emily Wood talked about looking for programming. People found their way into programming. I know Christine will talk a little bit about Upward Bound and how important getting information from these groups are. But to have someone walk you through financial aid and explain that, ironically, the more children you have, the more financial aid your family is entitled to, right? So it's, again, demystifying or pulling back that curtain about how am I going to pay for this? Also, student loans, I think Jay mentioned that. There's federal work study where, if you're lucky, I didn't hang on to this job. I was too naive and I was really bored. I have ADHD too, but I worked at the library and I checked out reserves, which people don't do anymore. They actually go online and click on a link. You guys are so spoiled. You don't have to go to the physical library anymore. But I was so bored, but I was getting paid really good money to sit there and effectively study. So financial aid is really important. We're gonna talk a little bit about that, but please do click on this link into deep dive. I also want to mention that Travis Wells, rather, is another Chamorro community organizer and in Turtle Island, and he broke down the Common App last year. He also shared, and this is a theme among us across several panels, that unfortunately he was not encouraged by his high school guidance counselor to go to college. And so he went to community college first, and then eventually made his way, transferred to a four-year institution and completed a master's degree like Maria Jesus. Another Chamorro alum, my colleague, Alfred Flores Perez, also started at community college and is now a professor at Harvey Mudd College, which is one of the very prestigious and selective colleges as part of the Claremont schools, where Maria also took her degree from one of the Claremont schools. So keep that in mind. We also went into great detail, which we're not going to do today, in the deep dive webinar. We broke down personal essays. And I want to share something with you that my colleague, Dr. Maria Therese Perez Hattori at University of Hawaii mentioned, that for a lot of Micronesian people who she works with at UH, she designs particular programming, and for Pacifica people, we are raised to be mamalo. We are raised to be humble. And there's a way in which personal essays or even job interviews, it feels like I'm supposed to go in and brag about myself, and it sort of conflicts with our culture in a way. And so I think it's really important to understand, which is part of what this webinar is talking about, is you can be vanidoso, not necessarily of your individual self and achievements, but of the people you come from and the way those achievements are always linked to our mañana, to our ancestors, etc. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tamika, who's going to talk about the Common App, and she will be followed by Christine Camacho, my co-chair. And I will go ahead and let you take it from here. What's that, Christine? It's the other way around? It's the other way around. All right, that's fine. We can change this up, right? We don't have to be rigid. All right, so Christine, please pop up.
Oh, I made myself unready. I thought it was Tamika next. Okay, so hafa day, everybody. Now I'm kind of thrown off a little bit, and now my anxiety has also kicked in, so I completely relate to what everybody else is saying. And I had to write this part down because I get nervous speaking Chamorro because I am a new Chamorro speaker. So, buenas den hafa day todos samsu, si Christine Camacho zu, sumasaga zu giza Pittsburgh na ciudad, living on the ancestral lands of the Lenape and Shawnee peoples. I was born and raised on Guam and in California. My family names are Camacho, Familian Victoriano Cheli, Giza Higatnya Heights, Sablan, Familian Sopti, Giza Sinahanya, and Rosario, Familian Kaila, Giza Barragata. I am one of the founding board members of the Chamorro Association of the Midwest, and I'm actively involved in multiple nonprofit projects for military veterans, the unhomed, and victims of human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the FAFSA. Let me see if this shares my screen correctly. Hold one moment, please. Technical difficulties, so sorry. It's not letting me come. Why isn't it letting me go? What can you guys see? There we go. Can you see the whole thing? Okay. Why is it doing just a portion of it? Please hold. I'm so sorry. All right, here he goes.
Okay.
Try again. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. That's why. Sorry, everybody. I was in beta. That's
Data.
okay. Yeah.
That's all right.
Threw me off a little bit. All right. So we're going to cover the FAFSA. Can everyone see my screen? All right. I'm going to go over about my college pathway, my journey. So every college journey, as you're finding out today, is different, and that's perfectly okay. It actually took me nearly 20 years to get where I'm at, and I graduated from high school, and then I was pregnant shortly thereafter at the age of 17. I, like a couple other panelists, I started college when I was in high school, attending classes in the morning at GW and then going to the University of Guam during the day. I made my dad super proud, and then I got pregnant, eventually became a single mom and dropped out of college in 2000. I gave birth to my oldest daughter at the age of 18, and then my youngest daughter at the age of 22, both of whom are now 18 and 22. And so it's interesting to see who they are and how they've grown, and the fact that I was a mom at their age, you know, that I'd been giving birth at their age. I finally finished my bachelor's degree in business management in 2016. In 2018, I became PMP certified. That's a project management certified. That is an international certification, not just here in the US. And in 2018, I became the company where I work, their first ever person of color, Indigenous person, and female C-suite executive. I am a COO. I run the operations for a health and wellness organization. I finished my master's, my MBA in 2019, and last year started my PhD. I became obsessed at some point with the alphabet soup, if you will. First getting my bachelor's and then my MBA, and then I had to get my PMP, and then I was a COO. And then, you know, along the way, you learn that the most important thing I am is a MOM. I'm a mom. And now I'm going to get emotional because for me, I grew up prior to having my kids, and similar to a lot of people from Guam, you know, I was a victim of domestic violence. I was trafficked when I was living in Las Vegas. I was trafficked by my mother for drugs with her boyfriend, and I was a foster child. And so when my dad got us out of foster care when I was a young girl, we were way behind in school, and I'm trying not to look at the camera because then I'll cry. So he got a chalkboard. We were incredibly poor, and we lived in the studio apartment in Vallejo, California. And he sat us outside and had us learn everything. We, you know, our ABCs, our 1, 2, 3s, our multiplication tables, you name it. He wanted us to be in a better place than he ever was. So I'm incredibly grateful to him. And then, as you can see, you do want to have, and as a couple of people alluded to, you really should have a good support system. My kids are my number one, but my husband has been absolutely amazing. So I have a picture of him here, Clarence, our technical director, because as I'm going through school now, and then with everything that I do, he's always there for me. So anyways, moving on to the next thing, we'll go over the FAFSA. So there's a number of ways, as you heard, that people can go get funded, their college funded, and I wish I knew some of the things that some of the people here got to take advantage of, but we'll go over financial aid. Some people will not go through it. I don't know why it's not going. Some people may not apply for the FAFSA. They think maybe they don't qualify. And then sometimes there's just millions of dollars essentially left on the table and people don't take advantage of it. There are certain types of deadlines, and you want to know what they are at the state and federal level. The things that you want to do is to gather your materials. Some of you might be adults returning for college. Some of you are parents, or some of you are students here. Definitely have your tax returns, any bank statements, your social security number, your parent's social security number, your driver's license or government ID, all the federal school codes for the schools you are applying to, and your FSA ID. So your federal student aid ID, that is incredibly important, and I will stress that throughout this because you will need it all the time, and you will need to remember it for a number of years before you enter college and as you get through college, and even paying back your loans after you've completed school. You do want to fill out the application early. I'll show some of the state deadlines in the next slide. Financial aid at some schools is first come, first serve. So the sooner you get it done, the better. Do fill it out online. If you're prepared and you have all your paperwork ready, it takes about 30 minutes. There is an IRS data retrieval, so you can enter some of the information and it'll auto-populate from your tax return. So you don't have to complete all of those different fields. Do not, like I said, do not skip the FAFSA and don't be intimidated by it. Tiha, Professor, she mentioned a couple sources. Studentaid.gov is your friend. There are online tutorials on YouTube that walk you through step by step on what to do as well. So lots of resources, make sure you get it from a credible source. And every time I move my face, I cannot go to the next slide. One second. FAFSA form deadlines, I touched on it a little bit. There's the college deadline, the state deadline, and the federal deadline. So it's important to know which is which. I'm going to, for an interest of, to best interest of time. So October 1st is when it becomes available. There are certain states that can do so between immediately after October 1st. Guam is one of them. Between November 2021 and October 22, the remainder of the states here that are in that peach color. Financial aid that you're eligible for when you complete the FAFSA, there's federal student aid, there's state financial aid, and there's school financial aid. This includes scholarships through your school or the program you may offer. That's completing the FAFSA. Outside of the FAFSA, there are other grants, there are other scholarships. We'll put that on the website as well and send it in an email following up from this particular webinar. If you're in high school right now, or maybe may even be familiar with the Upward Bound program, they're also a great resource for understanding how to fill out the financial aid form, what scholarships are out there, and just in general, helping you through college and the application process, and just doing well in school and understanding what resources are out there. The types of federal student aid, there's Pell Grant, work studies. So what federal work study is, basically you can work while you're in college and they'll give you basically minimum wage, but you can use that towards going to school. There's subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans and plus loans. There's a lot of technical mathematical things that you need to understand that I am not an expert on, so I will provide the resources. I don't want to give anyone the wrong information and then they go and do something and apply for financial aid and not get it correct. Multiple different grants, and we'll provide all of these links on ChamoruPathways.org and in the follow-up email. Scholarship resources. In addition, one of the things that we want to do here at Chamoru Pathways is have a scholarship ourselves in 2022. There are other organizations, Chamorro organizations throughout the country that might have scholarship opportunities, Asian Pacific Islander scholarships, religious or community, so your church, local businesses, private companies. This is really cool. I appreciated finding this on the student aid website. So really, like the Life of Game, walks you through what are the step-by-step processes, right? Create your username and password. If you are a parent and a student, both of you need two separate federal student aid IDs in order to complete the FAFSA, and I'll go into that here a little bit later. Make sure you put that ID in a very safe spot. There is a demographic section, enter your name, your birth date, list the schools you want. Even if you don't think you're going to get accepted there, or you may not even apply, list those schools on the FAFSA. Excuse me. My husband's amazing. Answer the series of questions to determine your dependency status. We'll move into that a little bit later. Some of us come from different family situations, so there's sometimes questions that kind of get you caught up in the FAFSA application process. If you know what to answer ahead of time, it won't be as complicated. So you determine basically if you're a dependent student or independent when you complete that. And then you're either going to provide your financial aid information or your parents' financial aid information. So it's key to make sure you're filing your taxes and keep that in a safe spot and ready to go. And then at the end, you're going to sign your FAFSA. So I have this slide here to remind us that it's important to have our FSA ID. I can't tell you how many times I have lost that thing. I am not great at passwords, and I hope you guys are much better than I am. Yeah. All right. So that, again, parents and students both have to have different IDs, different logins. What will you actually use that username and password ID, right? Just to tell you to have it doesn't make sense unless you actually know what that purpose is, right? So if you're a parent, you're going to use that to sign your FAFSA form and apply for the PLUS loan every year that they're in college and you choose to cover them. So I do that for my daughter, who is a first year student at Pitt. And then for students, you're going to use that to complete and sign your FAFSA form each year as well. There's a master promissory note depending on who the borrower is. And that's basically a promise to pay your loans back. Here are some tips when you're creating the username and password. Again, parents will need their own username and password. Only one phone number can be linked to the account. So if you're the student, use the student's phone number, right? And don't use your high school email. Don't use your college email if you're going from college to college, but use a personal email, because if you don't have access to that later, you won't be able to retrieve like the security questions. And then link an email and phone number to your account and set those challenge questions to something you'll remember. How to complete the FAFSA form with your parent, right? So this is beautiful. We're going to put this up on our website. You can also find it on studentaid.gov, right? What are the different steps? Student, you're going to fill out, you're going to go to FAFSA.gov, you're going to get that FSA ID, you're going to complete the form. It's fairly straightforward. Go step by step, it'll tell you what to do. Then as a student, you're going to hand it off to your parent and they can answer some of the demographic and financial questions. And then both of you, after selecting the Proceed to IRS button, will complete some of the data there. And then digitally sign your form, and then the parent will sign. And this is so important. My daughter went to Pitt, and this is why her father and I are divorced, and we've been divorced for a long time. We get along really well, and her father also remarried, but it became kind of a little bump in the road to understand, well, whose income do they use? And we have shared custody, which is split 50-50. We decided to go because her father claimed her on his taxes. We decided to use his instead. But there's some questions that'll help you kind of determine that. Some people, the mother is the primary custodian or the legal guardian, or you might have an aunt who takes care of you. So there's some questions there, and we'll go through that here. They make it really easy, right? Will you be 24 before January 1st of next year? Are you working towards a master's? Are you married, separated? Do you have children? Are you active duty? Are you a veteran? By the age of 13, were you dependent of court? Are you emancipated? Or are you unaccompanied, right? Because I know that there are those situations out there. And if you select yes to all of these, you are dependent student, right? I'm sorry, independent. And then if it's no, you're considered a dependent student. So my daughter, for example, Chloe, she is 18, she'll be 19. She's still gonna fill out her FAFSA now for her sophomore year. And she will not be 24. So she would have no in all of these columns. And then she knows that she would have to use her parents on her FAFSA, our financial information, right? Another way that they do this is they have a helpful chart. Are your parents married to each other? If they are, this is what you do. Do they live together? If they are, this is what you do. But if they don't, right, then you choose the parent who you've lived with the most and who's taken care of you over the last 12 years. This is very common, so they've had to create this. Report information for the parent who's provided more financial support. Like I said, in my situation, my ex-husband and I get along very well. It's 50-50 all the way down, but we used his because he can draw on his taxes. Let me go to the next piece here. So what parents need to know, again, they keep stressing, get that FSA ID. Before your child begins your form, gather your tax returns and all of the documents that you need. If you have multiple children completing the FAFSA, you must report the combined value of education savings for all of the children. And then another thing too, I am earning my PhD. I do complete the FAFSA as well. So both of us, right, and they'll be able to, both of us are completing the FAFSA at the same time, essentially. So it's important for me to have a FSA ID that's separate from her as a parent, me as a parent. So that can be where it gets tricky. Again, there is a helpful tool. You can income tax reforms that they can upload and auto-populate everything that you already have on your electronic file, your electronic federal tax return. It'll walk you through it. You log in to FAFSA.org. You're going to complete the section, basically your name and your social security card. It'll populate all of your financial information, and then you'll review that, make sure it's correct, and then it'll help you get through a little bit more quickly through your FAFSA. This is a question that's important right now. When you're completing the FAFSA form, you should not include the stimulus checks based or any of the COVID-based grants as income, whether it's taxable or untaxable. But do list the full amount that's in your bank account. And that doesn't matter where that funding originated. Hope that's helpful. Real quick, and another reason why your FSA ID is important, after you've been awarded and the school says you're getting this amount of money, and before you attend school, they're going to make sure you verify all the information is correct. You're going to sign the promissory note that says, yes, I agree to pay this when I'm done. And then this is the counseling how to be a responsible borrower when you're going to school. And then also the annual student loan acknowledgement that you'll need to sign. And so having that FSA ID is important. Something to be mindful of, there are student aid scams out there. People will try and get you. Just if someone's asking you for any upfront or monthly fees, or saying act now, I get these phone calls still, or they guarantee immediate and total loan forgiveness, or asks for your FSA ID, do not give it to them. So just be mindful of those things that can be happening out there because they know people are looking for financial aid. And then again, studentaid.gov is your best resource. They have wonderful, wonderful articles out there, 7 things you need to know before filling out, the do's and don'ts. They even have a chat where you can answer some questions here if you need to navigate through what you need to do next. They have a little helpful chat there. And then, like I said earlier, online video tutorials that walk you through. This is a screenshot and an example on YouTube. To begin the FAFSA, it tells you what forms you need to have, your FSA IDs, your taxes, the student's taxes if the student has them, today's bank balance, and today's investment balance. And that's all I have for, let me stop my share. That's all I have for my financial aid. Sorry it went so fast. I was just trying to make up for the time there.
I really want to give a major shout out to Christine and Tamika for being willing to take on, you know, the less sexy, the less sexy parts of the webinar. I'm truly grateful, but I just asked Clarence, and one of the things we'll try to do on our website is to timestamp when this panel begins for parents, because there's a lot of really nitty-gritty details that you will need to know, and you're going to want someone to walk you through. So again, we are creating resources here as well as storytelling, but Clarence, I'll ask you, we'll work on that afterwards and make sure that we put that information. Please timestamp, you know, not because you want to see me dancing. Everybody else was really good at dancing, but because there's a lot of really granular, to use that term, information that's being supplied here by our 2 speakers. So thank you both, Christine, who is very thorough, and now Tamika, if you can take us through the Common App, I'd appreciate that. So everyone's hang in there. We're almost at the very end, but this is really important information for possible applicants.
Okay. Whew. I'm gonna try to calm myself because I know we're over time now. Let's see. So I'm gonna, oops, I need to share my screen first. That would be good. Okay. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Yep, okay. So Guahusi Tamika Velarde. I kind of introduced myself a little bit before, and I guess to tell you a bit about me, down here in this bottom picture, here's my mom, Christine Carbolito Bethay, and my dad, Rand Bethay, and there's me. This is before my little sister was born. These are my cousins, Denise. I think this is Michelle and Joy. And both of my parents were enlisted in the military. So I was raised kind of like Nicolene, all over the world. And my parents really wanted us to settle down for both my sister and I to graduate from high school. So when they got to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, they kind of were like, we're going to pause, we're going to stay here so that the girls can get through high school. So I graduated from high school in Virginia, and I was the first person in my family to go through like as a traditional student. My mom was able to use the GI Bill to get an associate's, but I was the first one to have to navigate like the process of going from high school to college. And I attended Hampton University in chemistry. And I chose chemistry partially because an advisor in high school told me like, hey, there's this scholarship program at Hampton. Why don't you apply? The only thing is you got to pick a certain major. It has to be in the math. It has to be in math or sciences. So I just picked chemistry, and I ended up getting a master's of science in analytical chemistry from the University of Arizona. Went on to help start a biotech company called BioVidria and acted as their director of R&D for a little while. And currently, I am home educating these three, my kids, and there's my mom again. And I am a member of Masakata. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you all about the Common App. So I know we all have different experiences of how we got into college. For me, graduating in the year 2000, gathering up applications meant seeking out different colleges, figuring out what application I'm supposed to get, writing an essay, getting it off to these different colleges. And so this company called Common App, Common Application, they were like, well, why don't we kind of gather up a way for students to fill out one application and send it off to all the different universities. So they've kind of streamlined the process, and they have over 900 universities and colleges that that your application can go to. So I was going to play this video, but I think due to time, I want to just kind of skip this, and we're just going to dive into the actual website. Okay. So when you land on the Common App website, you'll have a landing page that looks like this. So if you were to look up most videos and information about how to use the Common App, they're going to be concentrated on the dashboard. And so when you sign in, your dashboard will give you the ability to look for colleges. So here you could look for a college by state. You can filter when you want to go, what zip code, if it has a fee to apply, and you can add those colleges in and apply to those. So here in this Common App tab is where this is the actual application part. This is where you'll put all your information, your name, your education for high school, like what your testing scores were for the ACT, the ACTs, AP, and you'll list your activities and your writing. And this is the Common App has a personal essay, and you can see that your universities that you chose to apply to, some of them want your essay and some of them will ask for a different essay. And that information will be available to you, like exactly what you need under the My Colleges tab. So you can see here for this, if you would have come to Buffalo to do undergraduate studies, you can see here that they'll have all the information about what you need to apply to UB. And so this Common App personal essay is required, and they have some additional questions that you'll need to answer. So this is kind of straightforward, maybe, right? So what I want to show you though is that Common App, like when you look up information about Common App, everybody will be kind of focused on this dashboard. And what they won't show you though, is that Common App has all of these different resources. Oops, let me go here. Have all these different resources on their landing page. So before you even sign in, you want to go to this. If you kind of feel like you have a little bit of a handle on how to do this process, you could go through this first time applicant guide. If you're a transfer student, like if Chelsea decided she wants to go to a different college, she could pick this transfer applicant guide. And what this will do is it will give you a step-by-step process of what materials do you need to fill out your application. You know, how do you create your account and add colleges and get support from people. So this is good and all, but as you've seen from the previous panelists, a lot of us still don't have a mentor or guidance counselors who can really like help us with each of these steps. So if you are somebody who needs like extra help, what I want you to do is go to the support your students page. Now this drop-down menu is actually for guidance counselors to use, but you have access, everybody has access to this. And so you can go here to this Common App Ready Toolkit, and this will lay everything out for you, like step by step. There are PDFs for every single step that you need to take here. So, you know, let me see, I'm gonna go down to, for instance, things like your high school details information sheet. You know, as a student, I know I wouldn't know what is my CEEB code for my school, right? I like if I was in the Common App and I had to fill these things in, it'd be difficult for me at the time, I know, to know that I needed this information. But they have these forms on each so that you can go to your counselor and say, what do I need here? How do I do this? Is my GPA weighted? Like, how do we do class ranking, right? Because these are things that you're going to need to put into the Common App, and you can organize yourself this way. And there's, you know, some information about how to approach your Common App essay, and even down to like understanding the recommendation process. This one here will go through, who do I ask? What is the recommendation process? You know, like, why am I asking for counselors to write letters to me, to the school? And it'll walk you through how to ask your teachers, your advisors. And there's also some, what they call brag sheets. And so what these are forms that parents or teachers, the student could fill out to help your recommenders write a letter of recommendation for you. Okay, so one of the other things that I wanted to point out is that it's not very evident on the Common App page, but there's this, if you can go to Common app.org/explore. There is another search menu in Common App that you're not going to see in your dashboard. And this one here, it has expanded search options, right? So if you could choose what type of applicant you are, where you want to go, what region. You can choose here what exactly you want the application process to look like. You know, if you want to look for a school that charges no application fee, you could put that there. You think that perhaps you need to go to a school that doesn't require a letter of recommendation, you can choose for that. You can also look for your campus setting, suburban, rural. Look at if you have certain financial aid needs, if you're gonna be able to use merit-based or need-based aid. That is something that you can also put in here. Minority serving institutions, we can pick, I want a school that serves Asian Pacific Islanders, right? So I can choose that here in this explore bar. right? And I can also look at enrollment size. Maybe it's not the best fit for me to go to a big school. I want to go to a medium school. So I can narrow down some colleges and find a school that fits best for me. Whereas in the dashboard, it's like a very basic search. Okay, and so another thing that I think is really, let me see if I can get back here to my presentation. Okay, what I want you all to do is this right here is a, let me see if I can move this here. This is a QR code that people who are coming back to read this, to watch this, they can scan this and it'll take you to a Google Doc that I made that has a lot of these tips in there. So also in the Common App, you're going to want to take advantage of financial aid resources. When you set up your accounts, it'll ask you, do you qualify for financial, for some type of need-based aid? And so if you qualify for like free SAT, ACTs, if you qualify for free lunch at school, free or reduced lunch, if depending on how much income your parents make, you actually can have all of your application fees waived on the Common App. And a tip that I think is really important is to save your essays and your answers on a Google Doc. Because if you can't, if you find a school that you want to apply to and it's not on the Common App, you can easily grab your personal essay or some answers to the other questions, your activities, and pop them into another application. Okay. And so that is pretty much the, oops, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so I just want to say congratulations to all, you know, those people who are thinking about going into higher ed, and looking forward to, you know, going into college.
Eva, thank you, Tamika. Everybody give her some love. Again, these are vital documents that you must navigate in order to gain admission. So we will make sure we timestamp them for you. One of the reasons that this webinar even exists is because I know for a fact, as a faculty member and as a sociologist of education, and I also suspected, as your stories are telling you, that even when, let's say, you have high school counselors who are supposed to be encouraging Chamorros or encouraging all students to pursue a higher education, that many of us are overlooked or rendered invisible. And so it's really important. One of the main takeaways I hope you have from this webinar is that we do exist. We have persevered, drawing on our own agency, on the love and support and encouragement of our familia. And we are grateful for all of that. But there's a way in which we need to create resources for our community. We're doing that with this webinar, but we also need to challenge each of our institutions to do better. Our underrepresentation is a product of social institutional practices. And we need to call these folks out, or call them in, if you will. And we are doing this out of a sense of Gwinaidza. We are not professionals per se. All of us bring different kinds of expertise. We are doing this out of a sense of love, which is what the term amateur means. It might be a little, a little sketchy around the corners here and there, but the fact is we are showing up for our people, but we each need to engage whatever institutions of higher education you did attend. Please send them a link to this webinar and challenge them, remind them, shame them if you must, and say, we're doing your job. You all need to do better. So as we close out, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that I think just sort of to wrap everything up in a knot. One of the most distinctive aspects that I think all of us are proud of in our Indigenous Chamorro culture is that we don't, in fact, view ourselves as individuals. This webinar has not been about ringing our own bell, right? It's been about how others inspired us, supported us, and even in our darkest moments, right? There was someone that we had to figure out how to latch onto, I mean, created community with. So we come from an interdependent people. The reason we share our clan names and our villages is because we're saying, I am not just Antoinette, sociologist. I am the daughter of Jesus and Victoria Tseferis. I am here because of what they did for me at a time that no one else was stepping up. That emphasis on respeto, on inafamalik, inakafli'i, tensuli. We are also wayfinders. We're Pacifica peoples. And if you haven't heard the term wayfinding, I think it's really important to meditate on it. It's this idea based on abundance and interdependence and reciprocity, that as long as we share, there's always enough. And as long as we pull together, we will always find a way. We will always find a way. So if you are watching this on FaceTime, or if you're watching the recordings, one of the last takeaways we want to provide you is that even if you find yourself as a first generation in a predominantly white institution, even if you are like Emily in Wyoming or Tennessee, this webinar is proof that you may be outnumbered, but you will never be alone. Well, if all of that, Sayana Ma'asi to our wonderful panelists, our chairs. Some people either could not make it. We wish them well. For those of you who came and had to leave, God bless you. I have almost never been in a space like this where Chamorros do not cry. And I like to think of it not as tears, but as a kind of christening, a kind of holy water, if you will, from the ancestors, to christen our communities, be they virtual, be they in person. We are Itautatano, Fanhogi CHamoru. Our wisdom, our ingenuity far outdates the arrival of colonizers. We go back millennium or millennia. Okay, someone's going to argue with me about that, right? I don't care. Tadzagwa. We come from ancient seafaring people. We were brilliant engineers. We are still resourceful Indigenous Chamorro people. All right. Dios di Adzuri Hamzu. God bless you. Thank you for hanging in here. Thank you for all of these amazing Chamorro faces. I'm always just so blessed just to see our cheekbones, skin color.
Tia, I'm sorry, everybody, I had to make the adjustment, but as you can see, I was coaching the game. I love you guys. You did an excellent job today.
All right. Do we have some play out music? Or are we going to try to do the Mañana tribute one more time? Because Tamika worked so hard on that.
We're going to do the Mañana tribute one more time.
Okay, let's try it one more time, and then you can stay on. Anyone, after the recording ends, I'd love to say a few thank yous to the panelists if you have time. But otherwise, God bless you all.
Can we shout out to Lonnie also for the Mañana tribute because it was her idea?
Yes, Tay, everybody. Again, not one individual, but all of us together.